Welcome to Blog Talk Radio. Please enter your host PIN. When finished, press the pound key.
To start your show now, press 1. To hear important instructions.
Your show will go live in 5 seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1. Blog Talk Radio.
Like I'm Saddam Hussein, doing my thing. Don't want the fame, just trying to make change. They took out my page. But an infinite gang, infinite plane, playing no games. Infinite gang, we ain't playing no games. Infinite plane, I'm on an infinite plane. Infinite plane, but what is I living is strange. Cause I'm on an infinite plane. I'm doing different things, yeah, I'm on an infinite plane. I'm on an infinite plane. I'm on an infinite plane. Stay with the infinite gang. Step on the street, pulling strings. But they can't fuck with the gang. I'm on the infinite plane. Infinite gang, man. That's in your mouth. I just take more play. Infinite plane society. Yeah, man. I know I do this black roller. Yeah, just do it, man. Can't take us down on this shit, man. You shit, man. Check the stats, man. And do it, man. Check the word is flat, man. Go up the whole, man. I take it down on shit right now, man. Shit, satellites are not real, man. I think satellites are real, man. I don't even know what the fuck it is. How about the Eagles and shit, man? They already got it, man. I'm telling you right now, it's all real. All the hopes, man. All the hopes, man. Shout out, what up, bro? Tim out, man. What up, bro? Yeah, man. Yeah, I'm up.
Alright, we are live May 21st, 2024, and we're going to talk about a few things that I have listed on minds.com/infinite plane society. First, let's get to the comments. Again, I'm posting videos on the main channel, and members are asking questions, which get prioritized before they go public. So I have a couple here to address. This one has to do with... Okay, one of our favorite topics, anthropogenic cirrus clouds. This is from LAC8609, says, not if you're inside your house behind a computer all day, get outside, look up. It's been going on since the 60s. I watch them all the time, laying fresh lines. Many people accuse me of never leaving my basement, and that's why I never see the space stations and the satellites and the chemtrails, because I'm just a basement dweller. But I spend more time outside staring at the sky than almost anybody I know. I'm sure of it. I make it a point. In fact, I am almost obsessive about it these days. And I have yet to have seen a space station or a, quote, chemtrail. So the issue here isn't that I'm staying inside. I go outside plenty. We're both seeing the same phenomenon. The difference is the interpretation. And your interpretation is influenced by a couple of logical fallacies and a nefarious agenda, in my opinion, to sabotage anyone critical of mainstream media with some easily debunkable bad ideas, among other things. I mean, we haven't even really done a study on the placebo effect, rather the nocebo effect, of believing that the skies are toxic. So no, I am outside. This is not reality denial on my part, but what I look at as a perfectly explainable phenomenon, you see as something scary, mystical, and unexplained. Pandora Wake said, don't let Owen Benjamin moderate those debates. I'm not subscribing because you never sent me the second magazine I paid for. Okay, I don't know if he got the right person there. Although I did see Owen Benjamin did moderate a flat earth debate. We might actually have to invite him to debate between myself and chemtrail proponents. I'm going to start using the word proponents instead of believers, even though that's pretty much what you are. I mean, what they are. But I think there's an agenda behind it, and we'll get to all of that in due time. I have a list of targets: Mandela effect, chemtrails, Q, the space station. We are aiming the turret of the think tank in many different directions right now, and I'm not losing my site or my organization or anything like that. I'm in control here. I'm not juggling too many things. We're definitely up to the task. Nick Finger 155 says, Tim, as of now, I don't think Jaren is a shill. Okay, this is in regard to my comments about the space station. He says, quote, he doesn't think the ISS is something people are in. I would like to suggest to you that it is something in the sky that may have been there for a long time, and the ISS is NASA's way of changing the old religion about it into a new religion about it. I've heard this before. I've heard this idea that there's already a luminary, and it just happens to move in this pattern, and in order to explain it away, NASA invented the space station, and some point to this ancient carving from like Sumeria, which looks like some kind of ISS-shaped deity in the sky. My issue with this is it begins with the presumption that there's something up there that we have to explain away, but the something has never been established. So that's one problem. Another issue is, well, I mean, I guess it's not even an issue necessarily, but it'd be very difficult to explain its rate of movement across the sky. And another issue is mainly that it hasn't been observed. If it existed the way they claim it exists, we would have a lot of just random people getting recordings of it. People would be mistaking the ISS for a UFO all the time, but it doesn't happen. Now, I have noticed there's an uptick on the theatrics, the fireworks show of sending these cylindrical blimps up into the sky in full view of the public in densely populated areas. Why? So people can say, hey, look, I saw the rocket go into space. Take that, NASA critic. Yeah, you didn't see it once it went out of sight, out of mind. It's a magic show. It's just such a big magic show, people can't really wrap their minds around the scale of it. All right, let me catch up on your comments. It looks like we have a good number who've rolled in here. Now, the reason why Jeranism is brought up into this conversation is that he has provided space station transit footage. But the problem is, and I mentioned this in a video today, it doesn't count. If your space station transit is in front of the sun, sorry, it's not evidence. No eyewitness. If it's in front of the moon, you couldn't see it because it's at night. Your telescope's not a witness. We need eyewitnesses. The only evidence I'll accept is you with your camera and your app and a streak of light behind your head. That's the only evidence I will accept. And if it's really traveling around with regularity and you can predict it with an app, as I've been told, this should be easy to produce. But time and again, I'm just completely baffled as to why the people who believe in it never bothered to go look at it. I had a conversation with MC Toon, and he said, bro, there's an app. You can just go out there and look at it. And I'm like, look, I got a Pokemon app. I don't believe Pokemon's out there. It's just an app. Have you seen it? And you know what his answer was? His answer was, in front of a live audience. You, Mr. Glurf, defending the existence of the space station, telling me to accept your burden of proof, use your app and see it for myself. I ask you, have you seen it? And he's like, no. Well, what does that tell you? So I'm raising the bar, I'm making some noise, and I'm hoping that somebody will rise to the occasion and provide the evidence. And I've been beating this drum for a few years now, and the best I get are occasionally someone will send me a video of an obvious airplane, which is laughable, but no app data to go along with it to prove it corresponds with the space station. And then I mostly just get claims, claims of, well, a lot of people have seen it, or I know somebody who has a friend who saw it. Again, no direct eyeball to space station evidence. So that's what we want to see. Prove me wrong. It's an open challenge. I want to be proven wrong if I am wrong. But at this point, the burden of proof has not been supplied, and they presented something to substitute for proof. They said, here's an app. Well, I'm sorry, but no one's able to use this app and provide anything convincing without, again, relying on the old magic trick of a solar filter or doing it at night. These do not count. It doesn't count if it's a lunar transit or a solar transit because it rules out eyewitnesses. Bottom line. All right, we are joined by Diana South from D-Live, Michael Jewell, Let's Go, Elephant Tusks, Lord Laney, Barth Northeast, Ollie Goering, Ted Stryker, Shannon Jones, Northern Girl says, it's all fake, ears up. Elephant Tusk says, everyone's all hyped up on what Terrence Howard said on Joe Rogan. Yeah, I heard that. I listened to parts of it. In fact, I have a clip here. And it's also being ripped apart by a lot of people as well. You know, I heard a guy talking about an explanation for everything, a theory of everything. And I don't know how long it's going to last up there before it's taken apart by more serious-minded individuals, you know, who aren't just utterly dismissive of what's been established. And it's not like he's going that far out because he's still adhering to the heliocentric thing. It's not like he's a flat earther. But what is the purpose of it? Like, what was the purpose of Joe Rogan talking to that other individual about how nukes are probably fake based on the video? It almost seems like they're getting ahead of the free thinkers and tapping into these subjects right now, and I don't really like it. It's troubling. Joined by Jennifer Reeves. Thank you for joining. Okay, let's see. I actually have some clips from that. Here we go. Terrence Howard claims he can kill gravity. Let's go ahead and play this clip.
Sun give birth to these planets?
The same.
Can you tell me how a planet is formed under this theory? So you have a sun, and how does the sun give birth to these planets?
The same way we defecate and have gas, like Jupiter's that red spot on Jupiter, that's spinning on it. That's going to become a moon.
Okay, so the red spot on Jupiter is some kind of an orifice, out of which another planetary body is going to be, excuse my language, but dumped out into the universe. I mean, this is his theory. Now, I'm not knocking it. Maybe it's true. It's no sillier than NASA's basic story anyway. This is all just a spin-off of regular NASA-tology.
It may take a billion or 2 billion years. That will ultimately become a moon off of Jupiter. Where is it? Right at the equator. Where do we discharge at? Right at our equator.
Wasn't this guy in Iron Man 1?
Now, this is Simon Dan who's commenting on it. I don't care about Simon Dan's commentary. His belief system's probably even less less attached to reality. I mean, this is just a version. It's a subset. Simon Dan just embodies everything that's wrong with glurfdom. And his main attack mode is ad hominem. If you have to use ad hominem, then you're not winning your debate. But that's just now getting out there. I watched a bit of it. I'm going to try to watch more. Daily Beast said, in an absolute journey of a video, Terrence Howard recently spent 3 hours regaling conspiracy-loving podcaster Joe Rogan with claims he is able to rebuild Saturn without gravity and has debunked the Pythagorean theorem. Now, he talked about being sentient in the womb. He was aware he was in the womb, which is a claim that isn't all that different from like what Scientologists say, and what he was suggesting is he was aware of his own reincarnation. Lord Laney says, preemptive auto-hoaxing control tactics. See, that's sort of what I think. I think this is mudding the waters. I kind of get the idea. But as far as this entire conversation, I listened to a lot of it. There's a lot of big claims, but to be honest, it sounds to me like mania being enabled, not challenged, and this extremely confident way of believing one's own ad hoc explanations for things. It's like making it up as you go, is in a way. I mean, there's no way to falsify it, is what I mean. It's practically mysticism, mumbo jumbo. I mean, anyone's welcome
90 seconds.
to prove me wrong on that. Okay, we are getting some kind of a notification here. Oh, I see. Phones are now open. Someone was on hold and I just missed it. The number is 563-999-3664. I'm going to listen to the rest of this conversation, I think, before I do a full review of it. Terrence Howard is either having a schizophrenic break or he's the smartest man alive, and I'm too dumb to know which, says Clint Russell.
60 seconds.
And a lot of people have said that. I'm not exactly sure why that's the default. The default is he really knows what he's talking about. It's like the benefit of the doubt you give to any of these New Agers or gurus or channelers. Like, you want to believe it's real, I suppose. But let's take a listen here, just to about 30 seconds of it.
specifically?
Well, the way the periodic table is laid out, the periodic table they have now,
Let's see.
it looks like a
Pull up
box.
an image of it.
It looks like a straight box.
Mm-hmm.
But they don't show that hydrogen has the same tone as carbon.
What do you mean by tone?
Same tone, same key of E. Same key of E. 40.5 hertz. The next one would be like 81 hertz. You go to silicon, it
10
would double
seconds.
up and would be 162 hertz. You'll go to cobalt and it'll be 324 hertz. It's take the angles of incidence or the tones that they create, their color. Like you can turn color back into sound based upon, it's the same wavelength, it's just twice as long or much longer. So all you have to do is keep dividing light by 2. You keep.
All right, now again, I would have to parse through this. I think the issue here is that he's going outside the range of my experience in this area, and so I can't just tacitly nod my head and say I believe it all. I need to take time. I have to suspend judgment. It kind of reminds me of how I initially gave benefit of the doubt to chemtrail theory. It's a simple thing where they appeal to the ignorance, and at the time I was ignorant about the real cause of the trails, so I was open, I suppose, to alternate explanations. And the way they describe it, it makes it sound like, oh, well, the official version has been challenged, or it's not reputable, and this one's more likely. So they're simultaneously discounting the established explanation and supplying an alternative while just raising questions and going outside of your knowledge base. And so in this case, I kind of think it falls into that, almost like he's, what is the word? Bamboozling. Yeah, I have to fix the phones. Not fix them, I have to turn them back on. I'm on a new phone system, and I have to set it up for 2 hours. I think I put it on 15 minutes, and it just expired. Elephant Tusk says, wasn't he on some crappy Fox TV drama? Joe Fiora says, I couldn't listen to him. It was just nonsense. Yeah, Elephant Tusks. Now he's some new age Tesla. Well, someone had pointed out his history, admitted history of being violent with women. And someone said, well, Tesla was trying to marry a pigeon. So I have seen the comparison. And, you're such a high functioning genius and you've tapped into the mysteries of the universe, so we can forgive your little foibles. This is where it's at. It says T. Howard at it again. He's not getting A-list roles, and he's been demoted to doing Joe Rogan. Yeah, that is kind of a demotion, following like Bart Sibrel. I mean, these are all feds. These are all operatives, and the fact that he's even in that chair is very suspect, in my opinion. Joe says, I was expecting him to talk about scandalous Hollywood shit, but no, he talks mumbo jumbo. IFepe73 says his new role is to play a genius or anointed one, a modern-day Enoch. Right, it could be like a Jim Carrey type situation. And, Jim Carrey does drop a lot of good information. I do think he has a great way of explaining certain things. And he did talk once about writing himself a check for millions of dollars and then having it in his pocket. And then later actually getting a check for that amount. There's actually a pretty famous anecdote. I'll put this here. Jim Carrey wrote himself a check for $10 million and kept it in his wallet. After 7 years of taking it everywhere, he got paid $10 million for his role in The Mask. He visualized himself as a successful actor and did mantras. Here's a little clip. Let me go ahead and play this. It is an interesting little clip.
I used to go up to Mulholland Drive every night, sit on the side of the road, look out at the lights, and go, I'm a popular actor. I'm, every director wants to work with me. And I used to open my arms and imagine things, things that I wanted to come in my way and stuff. And what I would do, it was a way of dealing with, being completely out of work. I would stay up there until I actually believed that I had all these things. And then I would drive down the mountain feeling like the biggest star in Hollywood. Like I was working all the time.
He's describing the general process of neurolinguistic programming, of basically rewiring your perception of yourself and reality in order to be receptive to opportunities or to achieve things you might not have done otherwise. Whether there's anything quote magical to it, that's up to interpretation. Synchronicity plays a role in it. What is synchronicity? If it's not just evidence of some kind of a feedback loop or a connection between the self and the universe, that it is somewhat responsive, and this would kind of suggest so.
I'm like the best people wanted to work with me, and I had my thing in my pocket, my little check in my pocket.
You wrote yourself a check.
Yes, I did. I guess it's like 6, 7 years ago now.
Anyway, kind of low volume, but it's an easy to find clip. I am getting into this Terrence Howard, but I'm just noticing Jim Carrey's persona emerged later on to be this new age guru type. Let's listen to a little bit more of this. Is he having a break? Is it mania, or is it an act?
Age.
I had already seen this. This was all inside of that palace. I had access to it, and I knew the
So you
relationship.
saw this in dreams.
I saw it as a circle. Everything was a full circle laid out, and each area was just expanding, like wrapping a rag around your hand. The first wrap, it's so tight.
I guess what I find about this that's kind of troubling or annoying is that it gets into the area where it's almost like listening to someone talking about their experience on LSD or mushrooms, and you don't want to say, hey, that didn't happen, you didn't experience that, you didn't have, like, even though they're just really high, maybe they did experience something transcendent, but at the same time, you can't take their transcendent experience and just ascribe any objective reality to it. So it's kind of hands off. It's another area. It's mysticism, not science. And I think here the lines are being blurred a little bit. Let's see here, going through your comments. T. Howard hanging out with Ryan Garcia. They should be the new odd couple. Yeah, Ryan Garcia admitted that he was hoaxing the world into paying attention to his fight, and he got $50 million about it. $50 million, $12 million was like a bet. He got a lot of attention by doing this, Bohemian Grove Me Too thing. But I'll likely watch more of it before I do a full review. It sounds like compelling, like an interesting listen. However, I'm also interested to know how much of this is original. Is he regurgitating a bunch of stuff he learned on YouTube University, and the stuff that's allowed to stay on YouTube? Because, it's great that you can decode reality, but you still have a worldview that's been corrupted and filtered through Big Brother's monopoly on perception. You still believe all the big lies, outer space, and just add on to it. This falls into what I would call MSM plus, where if you add on to the established picture and you don't subtract, you're just adding MSM plus, then you're deeper in that box. So now everything's just like they say, except here's some additional stuff. You haven't challenged the basic framework. And I prefer the subtractive, and I step out of it because I don't take for granted their big picture. And so I'm not going to build on it. To do so is just folly. It's not going to take you closer to reality. It'll take you deeper. And the state of the world is such that you could have the most outlandish thing, and it's not going to be challenged. Some segment of the population will accept it. And we've seen multiple demonstrations of this. We see it all the time. Like, honestly, right now, David Icke should just bring back the reptilians. They used to laugh at that, remember? They used to laugh at it, then he changed it to shadow people. But I think maybe he was ahead of his time. Bring back the reptoids, shapeshifters, all of it. Alright, let's continue. Elephant Tusk says, it's annoying how everyone hypes the latest interview, article, or news story. Well, the only ones I really analyze or pay attention to are the ones that are hyped. And the reason why is that these are perception management operations, and these ideas are targeting certain demographics. So they're being purposefully disseminated. And I think it's important to know what the brainwashed believe, whatever their denomination of brainwashing is. Normie, woke, truther. I want to know what their programming is at, what they're ready to accept as real. Alright, let's continue. I'm not going to follow too much on that one until I've done some more viewing, just to be fair. And I am working on a video to take down the space station. I mean, the space station exists, but it's a movie. It's not a spacecraft. Okay, now someone posted this. It's a Saturday Night Live character, I think his name is Oswald Bates. And some say that Terrence Howard is actually playing a variant of this role.
Internalize the flatulation of the matter by transmitting the effervescence of the Indonesian proximity in order to further segregate the crux of my venereal infection. Now, if I may retain my liquids here for one moment, I'd like to...
And I do see a sort of a mirroring here of the maybe rhetorical techniques, the filibustering. I think there may be something there. This is from In Living Color. This is where it's at. It says, Tim, you see China got their pandas back. There's no giant pandas in the U.S. anymore. Why? Because we're about to go to war with them? That's really childish. Like, we're taking all our pandas because we're not friends anymore. It's like they're taking all the toys they left at your house. It's very childish. We can't be friends anymore. No more pandas. Speaking of panda bears, one of the arguments that panda bear denialists will say is that there's no history of pandas in China. They never write about them. There's no myths. There's no panda gods. Well, the truth of it is, and this is something I came across in foreignpolicy.com, Chinese people used to think pandas were monsters. They used to hunt them for their pelts. It was believed that sleeping on a panda fur could ward off ghosts. Says, though humans apparently ate panda in prehistoric times, contemporary Chinese have little taste for the animal. There's an oft-cited saying that Chinese people will eat... Okay, this is all... Here we go. Some of these things. Braised camel hump, monkey brains, shark fin. But apparently not pandas. But it suggests here that the pandas were known by a different name. And that's the part I wanted to get to. I believe the name is... Let's pull this up here. The animals were feared as metal-devouring tapirs who could chew the nails off a city gate. Chinese people used to think pandas were monsters. So there is a history of them. There are various descriptions of these monsters that you can find throughout 5,000 years of history. You really can. It's there. They just weren't called panda bears until more recently. What were pandas hunted for? It says, though rarely for food, they're hunted for their fur or just for sport. I don't know what kind of sport it would be. They're going to be like rolling down the hill, falling off trees. You're going to shoot them? Former U.S. President Theodore Roosevelt's son Kermit and Theodore claimed to be the first Westerners to bag a Chinese panda in April of 1928. The brothers said they fired at the same time, and both claimed the kill. Pandas exist. Alright, let's see. Elephant Tusk says, Tim always does the IPS a favor by watching garbage and translating it for us so we don't have to. He must have a subconscious mind made of steel. Yeah, it's like Clockwork Orange in here. I have to pry my eyes open and just kind of force it. And I do describe the Infinite Plane radio program as a fake news wood chipper. Because what we're doing is we are taking a lot of this stuff and we're just parsing it. Conscious Daughter says, I thought the panda was more symbolic, the duality, the black and the white. Yeah, you'd think that's what they would appropriate it for. Now, the creature, the name, the top here, the name that they gave for it, is also used for this black and white pig-like creature I've seen as well. Anyway, I'm just pushing back against the idea that pandas don't exist and there's no history of them. Yeah, there is a history of them. And why would you think they're monsters? Well, it's because they're mean. You know, if you don't believe in pandas and you think it's all just zoo employees in costumes, give one a hug. These things have been known to bite people's feet off. Like, that's just cruel. Like, just go for my jugular. Like, taking your feet off so you can, crawl away, leave a trail. No thanks. This is where it's at. It says, someone should go to the zoo and punch a panda. Right, I would stand by that, but I'm afraid somebody would do it, and then they'll blame the internet. They'll say, look what auto-hoaxing has done. Aries 1 says, pandas are derpy. Yeah, that's what I mean. Why would you want to hunt something so derpy? All right, this is where it's at. It says, I never trusted Joe Rogan, though. He calls UFC fights and does truth radio. What a joke. Well, I think it's unfair to hold him to a standard that he doesn't hold himself to. He's never been a paragon of truthiness. He's never been a truther. It's just by association. He's like friends with Alex Jones. So people see him as, if we can just somehow get Alex Jones and Joe Rogan to agree more, if Joe Rogan will just take some of Alex Jones's ideas, then the truth will get out there. And it'll leave Truthyville and it'll hit the normies and they'll wake up. So they're kind of using Joe Rogan to platform Alex Jones type ideas, but Joe's never been that. His questioning the moon landing and backtracking just shows that he's not all that interested in this area of discourse. Never has been. That's why it's so strange to me that now he's looking at these atomic bomb videos, these tests, and he's saying it looks fake. Like, did he get some order? Like, okay, now you can call these things fake? And those look realer than the moon landing. This is where I get into, the idea that maybe this person's planting ideas, because it's not consistent. If you can look at the Trinity site tests and say, hey, that looks fake, and then you look at the Apollo 11 and you say that looks real, you're being inconsistent. Because, in fact, the explosions look realer than what we saw on the moon. All right, let's move on here. This is where it's at. It says, Tim, what do you think about Jake Paul versus Mike Tyson? Yeah, I just saw some of those Mike Tyson, I guess they're called bites, speaking of cannibalism. And yeah, these are THC gummies with a little bite out of the top part of the ear, which is sort of a Mandela effect. But what do I think about it? I think it's a travesty. I think that the Pauls are trash. And they're also operatives and agents. I mean, what do they do? Logan Paul hosted a flat earth conference after electrocuting a dead rat and laughing at dead people hanging in a forest. And he was cited by internal memos as Google's reason for censoring videos, because they're like, look, this guy has a reach of 20 million who are mostly children. Anything he does is a bad influence. So he's like a wrecking ball. My point is, both of those individuals are part of this big clown show. I don't know why Tyson would sully his reputation. Although, who wouldn't want to see Jake Paul get it, really get taken out? But it'll probably be a psyop. I don't think any of these things are anything other than staged and planned. Like, for example, when Floyd Mayweather fought Logan Paul, I think he could have knocked out Logan Paul in the first or second round. But he held him up. If you remember, he held him up, prevented him from falling. Dinah South says, these guys are listening for sure. They've never had an original thought outside the black cube. Yeah, I was being facetious about Tyson's reputation. It's like, come on. Not at this point. There is no bottom. It's a bottomless pit. Clout chasing and all that. And that's really what it is. Clicks and clout, bread and circuses. It's a gig. It's all about entertainment, and they're kind of late to the whole wrestling thing, because Logan Paul's in wrestling, and he's in it now that it's already admitted to be, staged, faked. I mean, look, there's real athletics. Obviously, it's not something everybody could do, but it was sort of weirdly, it was sort of like taboo to call it fake, and then one day they just admitted it was real. I think it was more or less for strategic reasons. I think once they said, oh, this is actually kind of fake and staged, so we don't have to be regulated like a real sport. Okay, let's continue. This is where it's at. It says, I feel like R. Kelly's about to make a comeback. R. Kelly is friends with Frank James, the subway shooter, the Prophet of Doom. The Prophet of Doom had 500 subs on YouTube, and he was uploading videos threatening the mayor out there in was it Gotham? I mean, this is basically Batman. This whole story, it's like it's the Riddler. The Riddler story. The Riddler's threatening the mayor because he's not doing enough for the mentally ill. Frank James threatening the mayor, same reasons. The Riddler kills the mayor using a weapon called a tucker. Well, it's a carpentry tool. Then Frank James goes and he shoots up a subway. He finds the only subway cart that doesn't have any cameras inside, so there's no footage of it. And then he fires 33 rounds. We watched that whole video. In fact, there was this person in a red like raincoat that walks through the scene where the people who were shot were doing selfies of themselves in agony. And you see them dropping a bag, a blood bag. Like they dropped theatrical blood. They were dropping it there. It was just so, it was such a painfully executed, I mean, one of the worst psyops I've seen in a long time. Elephant Tusks, that's a strange question. If you want to call in, we can talk about it. I'll open up the phones. He says, you think marriage is a psyop? Look, we have to be very precise about our language. When you say psyop, what do you mean? Psyop isn't hoax, although there's some similarities there. Perception management is a little more expansive. But what we're talking about here is, when we say psyop, psychological operation, we're talking about an event, generally speaking. An event that is inserted artificially in order to create a change, a propaganda event. In other words, a lie. But there are various ways we can, insert something. But when we use the word psyop kind of flippantly, I don't know what you mean. Like, no, people really get married. It's not a hoax. I don't know what you mean. Okay, let's continue here. I'm looking at your comments. I'm going to have to open up phones again. I realize I didn't put a long enough timer. We're talking about pandas. They exist and they're deadly. Tons of new unsealed filings on classified docs case. So this was brought up today. This is by Julie Kelly on Twitter. And what was brought up here was that when the FBI went to Mar-a-Lago to seize classified information, U.S. government documents, they had a warrant. And their order contained a policy statement regarding the use of deadly force. Law enforcement officers at the DOJ may use deadly force when necessary. So it's been pointed out that they had the right to use deadly force when they were there. Why would we have this story out there? Why does it matter? I think it's part of the general buildup of the narrative that's going to support the headshot, the JFK-esque psyop that they're going to use on Donald Trump. Oh, I see. Elephant Tusk says, make more like to convince people to procreate to feed the Matrix battery. I see. I see what you're talking about. I believe there's this notion with some of the Cathars, this Gnostic sect, who believe that you have to abstain from the flesh, abstain from the material world, that reincarnating is self-defeating, putting yourself back into a prison run by the demiurge, some evil god. And they definitely were not for procreation for that reason. And I think some of the more extreme acts were acts of self-sacrifice, like fasting to death, that kind of thing. What do you call that? Hunger strikes, but protesting the conditions of an inhumane world itself. Like, I'm doing a hunger strike against the demiurge, not going to eat. But I don't have the perspective that this world is a prison, that I have to get away. I'm not scared of everything, terrified, looking for more things to be scared of. I don't have that negativity or that pessimism. I really don't. And I think that we are supposed to. I think that's how the power elite are able to disabuse you of the value of your own existence and life, and to also lower the value of other people in your eyes. Imagine being a hardcore environmentalist leftist, and you see people in a sports stadium. You probably think, look at all those breathers, those carbon super spreaders. This is like a tumor on the side of Mother Earth. Please stop breeding. Like, imagine having that level of hatred and misanthropy. And that's based on a scientifically informed opinion. If you follow the scientific consensus, you should hate yourself and everybody around you. So no, I don't fall for that. And I think that that's a reiteration of the older concept of sin, where flesh is sin, flesh is bad, we're bad because we're just humans, we're beasts, and I can't wait till we all get beamed back up to heaven, so I hope the world ends soon. That's why people want the world to end, because they've been taught to hate their existence, or to fear the world or something. I mean, maybe this is just a very complex problem. Maybe your existence here has a purpose. I happen to think it does. And I don't think the purpose of it is to hide from it, or to be, I guess, misinformed about your purpose to where you miss it. All right, let's continue here. Yes, Diana South. Trump feeds the victim mentality. People root for the underdog. He certainly does, and he does a lot of the martyr stuff. He's definitely playing the role of the martyr. And, you know, just to point this out, the white nationalist types, the Nick Fuenteses, the types who are, you know, always mad at Jews, they are the biggest victims in the world. They're a bunch of babies. You know, the victim mentality on the left is well known. You know, the idea of taking the role of the marginal, the victim, the oppressed. Like, oh, we're oppressed, you're the oppressor, therefore anything we do against you is justified. And you're very evil because you're the oppressor. So that's always been like a leftist thing, an emotional appeal, and I've never fallen for it. But the far fringe right has adopted it, where they're like, hey, help me, I'm being white genocided. Care about my legacy and what they're doing to us. And it's like, you're just sort of the inverse of them. Why don't you just go create your own little white state somewhere? Because that's what you're doing. It's the inverse. And they're claiming they're being genocided. I'm like, okay, these are extreme claims. And to say that they're being victimized real time, again, it's just weak. And I don't really fall for any of this stuff, because it also brings in a few other elements. Now you have like collective guilt. Now somebody is guilty by not just association, but by birth. And it's just a mirror of critical race theory. You know, aren't we sick of the far left blaming systemic racism and whites for everything? But then far right, it's the same thing, but it's systemic Jews, and they blame Jews for everything. So critical race theory and critical Jew theory are identical. They're both prisons for the mind that create a victim mentality. And it's like, yeah, they can go just, you know, have their beef over there. I'm not interested in their little fight. I'm not interested in any of these bifurcated psyops. All right, moving on. We've talked a lot about this Trump psyop to come, and we're just maintaining a great level of high level of awareness about what the world stage has in store. These are plot twists that we're calling out in advance. So spoiler alert. They are going to do something violent very soon. And it's going to be simulated and staged. And it's going to be meant to shock the world. It's going to recall JFK, Abe Lincoln. We all know what this is going to be. The death of Biff Tannen. But he's not going to die. He's going to come back, according to the script. So check this out. Trump deletes Reich MAGA video from Truth Social. Trump has deleted his Nazi-esque Reich MAGA video from Truth Social, his version of Twitter. The video mentions the formation of a unified Reich and a FAFO, that's FAFO, executive order, and violence in the form of a headline mixed with MAGA messages and pictures of Trump. Let me play a clip of it.
History is underway. No more wars. As we focus on home, law and order is restored. The American dream is back, and the best is yet to come. Make America great again.
Okay, so what does a unified Reich have to do with it? I think it's obviously a dog whistle. But no, the thing is, they blame this on some staffer.
More than just my armpit.
Some unknown staffer. So they don't know who did it. So they say. However, at Mar-a-Lago, Trump says that the only people who have access to his account are himself and Dan Scavino, his social media manager. So if it's only Dan Scavino and himself, then who put this video on his account?
You know, it started off with Dan Scavino. I said, Dan, how do you work this thing? And I started dictating. I began by dictating to Dan and a couple of other people that we had, but they weren't Dan. And I'd dictate something, and all of a sudden people started following. And then on occasion, like about once every 3 years, Dan wouldn't be around because he was Ozer. I couldn't.
Anyway, it's just him and Dan. Big contradiction. This is where it's at. It says Trump's not getting whacked. He's the psyop that keeps on giving. The script has it that he gets a wound, but then he comes back with a bloody head wound. Revelation 13. He's the Antichrist in that particular script. And that the resurrection is going to be something that is like a 9/11ing of our entire system. I'm not sure what the repercussions would be, but the code's all there. It says 9/11 on the side of his head, 4547. Ollie Goering says, I wish memory foam was edible. They feel so delicious, so comfy. Daniel says, don't get Tim started on chemtrails. You know, I love chemtrail theory, but chemtrails don't exist. And there's a huge problem in Trutherville with what it comes down to is bad argumentation. And we're going to deal with it. Chemtrails will not survive the summer of 2024. It's one of two things is going to happen. We will have debunked them, or we will have revealed that they exist, and then I will personally put a stop to them. Because none of the chemtrail proponents have any kind of aptitude for activism or raising awareness other than just creating outrage. And that's all it really seems to be. They're just outraged. They don't really do anything with it. The environmentalists have got this thing figured out. All right, let's move on. Ted Stryker says, sorry for this lame Mandela, but was it Smokey Bear or Smokey the Bear? Was it forest fires or wildfires? Now, this is another subject that I think is worth getting into, mainly to point out that the realm of possibility does not include reality changing. So when there's a discrepancy, you have to rule that out first. And you have to rule in what's more likely. You misremembered. That's what's more likely. And the Mandela effect is actually a form of gaslighting that gets you to doubt your perceptions. And if you can get someone to doubt their perception about something that occurred, and then you introduce how it might have been, they can imagine it. They can picture it. So this prompted imagining is now on their mind at the same time as their recollection, which has been made a little fuzzy. It's been, I guess, questioned a little bit. So there's some doubt there. So you have the doubt about what you remember. You have your newly created imagining, and these things get confused. There's no reason to include that reality is shifting. There's no evidence for it. And there's plenty of reasons not to accept the premise. If you accept the premise that reality is shifting, then why would you even care about the news? Because reality is shifting, so the news that is reported is also shifting. It reaches a place of nihilism. However, beyond that, it's just fundamentally dishonest to assert the Mandela effect exists because it's not a spiritual phenomenon. The Mandela effect is not like a psychic perception, it's not a synchronicity, and it's not spiritual. It's the byproduct of a misunderstanding about recollection and how your recollection can be interfered with. It's actually a mind game. It's a tricky game, and the people who are playing it often don't know. So here's an explanation for the Berenstein discrepancy. One thing that solves all Mandela effects is more context. So what we have here is this. No one can convince me these memories are false or made up. I think people should have more faith in their memories. No. People say, well, don't you believe, your own eyes? These trails are there. It's like, yeah, your eyes aren't lying, but your perception, your interpretation, that is something that can be messed with. And so having faith in memories doesn't make sense if you understand how memories work and how they can be affected. This is the reason why so many people get charged with crimes they didn't commit. Faulty eyewitness testimony. Faulty eyewitness testimony is created by the interrogator, by their bias, by their interference with the recollections. That's how easy it is to mess with somebody's memory. Possible explanation here is this. You have the intro music to the Berenstain Bears.
Somewhere deep in bear country lives the Berenstain Bear family. They're kind of furry around the torso. They're a lot like people, only more so. The bear fact is that they're just like you.
So there you go, Berenstain.
Somewhere deep in bear country lives the Berenstain Bear.
Berenstain Bears. Berenstain. There you have it. Solved. So you think it's Berenstain? You remember it Berenstain? You're wrong. It's Berenstain. Now, I don't know how relevant this is, but I was talking about Elvis quite a bit lately, thanks to Jurassic Liars calling in. Graceland battle. And he mentioned that Graceland looks like the White House. And I'm looking at this picture, and it looks like the White House. Elvis Graceland home up for auction because Lisa Presley failed to pay back a $3.8 million loan. So that's happening right now. Battle over Graceland. Okay, let's see what else we have here. Nick Finger says, I remember arguing with my brother whether it was pronounced Berenstein or Berenstein. So you recall an argument over it. So there's already a discrepancy. And I also want to note this, that these are memories that you form when you're a little kid and you're just learning how to read. So there's that. But these discrepancies in no way should introduce as an explanation something that has never been proven to exist. Reality changing retroactively. This is not something that happens. And the explanation makes a lot more sense, and when you learn how it works, not only are you inoculated against future Mandela effects, but you're more aware of how memory works and how you can be messed with through gaslighting. In fact, the Mandela effect is also an instance of how limiting the options can lead somebody to a false conclusion, especially when you don't offer anything outside of options that both lead to the same exact outcome. So these aren't even real choices. I mean, look, if you're going to accept the premise that reality is shifting, it can't just be A or B. It shouldn't just be Berenstein, Berenstein. There should be 50 variations of it. Why is it always a binary? You can't say that reality is fluid, but then every Mandela effect is binary. It doesn't make sense that you would constrain it, and that artificial constraint is a dead giveaway that this is a way of leading people to the conclusion that their senses are wrong, that their memories are recordings that can be absolutely trusted, which they can't. These are shallow memories. One more example. I used to hear someone say, Timmy fell down the well, everybody knows, everybody remembers. Well, I don't remember. So I look into it. Turns out that Timmy, or the actor who played Timmy, published an autobiography called Timmy's in the Well. When asked why did you choose that title, he said, because it's the only place where Timmy didn't fall. It's like the only scene that didn't happen. He never fell in a well out of all the things that they had happen. But there is an episode where Lassie pushes some oil speculator into a well. So there is that. But the thing is, all these people who say they remember Timmy in the well can't answer this question, which is, how did they get him out? Did they use a rope? Did they use a, I don't know. I mean, a crane? How did they get him out of the well? Because if your memory is so good that you remember him in the well, even though there's no record of this, then why isn't your memory good enough to recall how he was extracted from the well? Another thing, and this has to do with context, when it comes to does Dolly wear braces? Even one of the great Mandela effect proponents out there says he had never seen the movie Moonraker. He's making the claim that Dolly used to have braces based on one scene where she smiles at a guy with these metal implants where his teeth, jaws they call them. So he's got this like dental set that's just very extreme. And so it would make sense that they would connect over her gaudy braces that they remember her having. And she does smile, and it would make sense. The problem is she doesn't have braces. And if you remember that she had braces, you would have to remember her on more than one scene. And for someone to say, I've never watched the movie, well, then you're not in a position to judge that one. The context kills a lot of these things. Okay, moving forward. Elephant Tusk says, Tim, why do you dismiss the concept of infinite realities and quantum physics? Because I don't trust mainstream science. I don't trust scientism. I don't trust their model. And also, I think that there's a vested interest in getting people to not hold any value to their material existence, to want to give it up. Like for example, environmentalism. Feel bad about what you consume. Feel bad for breathing. Feel bad for having human impulses and wanting to have kids. Feel bad for succeeding. Feel guilty for the success of your parents. And, there's this programming. And so anyone who's trying to tell me that reality's fake, nothing's real, it's like, well, then go manifest something. Go be Neo in the Matrix. If everything's magic, then prove it. It should get past theory and speculation, and it should become action. And I'm not saying that there isn't a, what would you term, spiritual or something, but when we get into this stuff, it's like I'm not going to use the language of the faulty model to form an explanation. I'm not like that Terrence Howard. I'm not going to build on crap. I think we have to go back a little bit. I'm way too agnostic, to be honest. I've become very agnostic. Matt X says, Lynn said on Fakeologist she remembers Dolly had braces and they changed the movie and there's residue, though no residue has been shown. Now, when people say, I remember, a lot of the times they're bearing false witness. So one of the things that we're doing here by embracing skepticism is we're admitting when we don't know. You can say, I don't know. Did she have braces or didn't she? My answer is, I don't know. She doesn't have them, not on the movie. But the reason people believe this Mandela effect has to do with, well, there's a number of factors. A lot of it is like urban myths, for example, rumors, misconceptions. Here's another question for the Mandoozled out there. Misremembered song lyrics. Millions of people misremember song lyrics. That's not a challenging statement. Why is it challenging to say millions of people misremember a line in a movie? We don't have to say they misremembered song lyrics because CERN. No, we don't do that. Why not? Well, obviously because there's a more reasonable explanation. Nick Fingar says, I remember the Far Side making Timmy fall down the well reference, and one panel's not enough to show you how he gets out. Yeah, well, okay, so the guy from Lassie, his name is John Provost. And John Provost has actually addressed this. So you'd think if he's part of a shifting reality, he would know about it. But he knows this is a catchphrase, and he did put out a book called Timmy's Stuck in the Well. Let's see here. Supposedly Timmy never fell down a well. Provost points out that he fell into. Here's the rationale for the title of the book. So Timmy grew up, the actor grew up, and he says that he chose this Timmy Fell Down a Well as a title for his bio because it's the one place he didn't fall. So Tim fell into, and here's a list. Wow, this is actually quite extensive. Mine shafts, cliffs, into rivers, lakes, and quicksand, but never a well. Now, let me play or read to you what a Mandela affected person claims to believe. And then we have some rational explanations. So Sherry Mack says, I saw the episode when I was a kid. I remember he went through some old woods with Lassie and he found a well with wood covering it. He tried to walk across it. Lassie didn't like the idea. So Timmy decides to walk across it and he falls in. Lassie runs off to find help. The girl asks how old is the well. They get the adults. They get him out. The wet boy pets the dog and the episode ends, but I can't find it. Okay, well, how did they get him out? And why would Timmy do such a thing? Stack of High Society says, Timmy's in the well became a catchphrase after the show's cancellation in reference to all the situations where Timmy's safety and welfare were in jeopardy. He never fell into a well in the show. John Provost chose the phrase for his memoirs. Provo in the well, the John Provost story. So no, it didn't happen. And if you're saying that it happened, you have to be very creative like that other poster and give us a description of how it all happened. Like the same people will say, I remember Sinbad was in a movie about a genie. And they will say they saw it on TV. It was very popular. Well, then, if it doesn't exist anymore, you have a script to a movie in your head that's good enough to be on primetime television. Maybe you should produce the movie about Sinbad the genie. But they never do. All right, continuing through some comments here. Distinguishable LAC says, sorry for bothering you. I want to offer a promotion of your channel, viewers, followers, chatbots. The price is lower than any competitor. Now, I don't really care about chatbots because to me it's about quality, not quantity. We are quarantining. We are being very exclusive. There are no chemtrails off-world stage. There's no Mandela effects. Reality is quite objective from out here. There's no political agendas. There aren't any of the truth or orthodoxies that make it this far. So we don't need a fake like we have a bunch of numbers because a lot of people trust high subscriber counts. Ted Stryker says, how do I get the Berenstain Bears song out of my head? You don't. Everything's in there forever. And that's something to consider when you consume anything in media, even passively. It's all programming. Okay, moving on. Elephant Tusk says, our reality has been wiped many times. You should preface that with saying, I believe. I believe. Because what we're getting at here is we're also breaking away from believers. There are people who believe that we're on a spinning ball. Others believe it's a flat disc with a dome. We have all these different beliefs, but many of these beliefs are unsubstantiated. They're premature to actually assert. And we're in the age of information, the age of finding stuff out. So we shouldn't be stuck with half-assed, unsatisfactory explanations. We should be instead seeking to answer the questions that are usually occulted by false explanations. I don't think we should be believers. I think we should move into knowers on all things. Otherwise, we shouldn't claim it. Why claim it? Why claim to know so many things, especially now? Why would we want to add to the pool of subjectivity? Just competing belief systems in this morass that's detached from anything objective. And the Mandela effect destroys objective reality. It destroys it. It makes it null and void. It doesn't matter. It's like you're going to talk about body counts, death counts, values, the future, the world, where it's going. What does it matter if everything can just change tomorrow because of CERN or whatever you think is changing it? And it's not just logos. It's not just pop culture references. Many Mandela effects are said to be physical, like your heart moved. Your heart used to be, I think it used to be on the left breast, like when you do your pledge, but now it's in the middle. The number of ribs have changed. There's more holes in the head. So there's these other aspects to it. In fact, some have suggested that Mandela effect is how we evolve into higher beings. And that's why I've been described as a God blocker, because I am blocking the Mandela affected on their path to godhood. Here they are trying to manifest better realities, better versions of themselves, and I'm locking them down in the consensus matrix through the force of my non-belief. Okay, moving on. Okay, Joe Rogan Experience 2147, Mike Baker. Look, I don't ever get into Rogan because it's not relevant to our conversation. He's just a mainstream voice. He's notable because of the very specific memes that he promotes. Now, recently, he's been talking about nukes being fake, which is one of our favorite subjects here, and it's especially relevant. Another thing we talk about, hyper-realistic synthetic masks. People who look like other people, foolproof, way before digital deepfakes. We've been deepfaked with disguises. And I've been talking about this, easily for 4 years now. Well, Joe Rogan had Mike Baker on, and they talked about realistic masks, movie special effects, makeup, Jonah Mendez videos. This was shared by Jay Diggs. So Jonah Mendez was the CIA Director of Disguise for 27 years. And in 2015, what she was working on became declassified. And she described how you could have half a dozen people in the room and they all look exactly like Saddam Hussein. Let me go ahead and play a clip here. Now, why is Joe Rogan getting into auto hoax territory? My suspicion, preemptive sabotage, perhaps maybe to get ahead of us. Because nobody else is pushing this. You realize that. There are no truther channels that are truly skeptical. No alt media is skeptical. We're the only ones threatening to mainstream media deconstruction at this level. And look, truthers generally don't like me. They're mad because I'm not mad. They're mad at me because I'm not fighting the info war. Because I'm not mad about lockdowns. I'm not mad about chemtrails. I'm not mad about Florida. I'm not mad at all. And since I don't have that reaction in me, I'm more like rationally responding to it. I'm looked at as part of the problem, which is not the case. They are the problem. You are the problem if you're a propaganda mule carrying toxic misinformation on behalf of Big Brother because you think you're doing people a favor, which you're not. It's all toxic. Anyway, here we are deconstructing the big lies and re-examining the world through the lens of skepticism without taking the screen as an argument from authority, because we know that it is a liar. That's not even a question at this point. But why are some of the top tier liars out there, the false worldview reinforcers, why are they getting into our territory? Let me play a clip here. Joe Rogan, Mike Baker talking about
whenever it's
we trust some science, just not chromosomes.
Yeah,
chromosome stuff is
it's very
fascist.
subjective, very subjective.
Fascist.
Yeah,
I wanted to ask you this before I forget.
Yeah.
When you were working for the agency, did you guys? I know that there is a program where they use special effects makeup to change someone's appearance. Have you ever seen that in person?
Oh, yes. Yeah.
How does it look?
Yeah. Well, it gets better all the time.
So
right?
could I go to a concert? Like, could I sneak into sneak into a concert with a rubber nose?
Yeah.
So Michael Jackson was known for going to baseball games in a mask. This is not new. Joe Rogan's playing dumb. This stuff was declassified just under 10 years ago, but they have been using it for decades. It's so good that Joe Rogan, as he looks right now, may be a total construct. This could be a mask, and it could have been this entire time. Interestingly, the 50th anniversary Scooby-Doo had Jake Gyllenhaal, and they did 50th anniversary Saturday Night Live did a Scooby-Doo skit. Jake Gyllenhaal was Fred, and they ripped the mask off the bad guy, and then he doesn't believe it, so he's like, let's see who this really is, and he rips the person's face off. Just a coincidence. Now, this was 2 weeks ago. So 2 weeks ago, Joe Rogan is getting into deep fakes, like true deep fakes. And I saw that this was an issue, that this was something that is a blind spot for truthers. In fact, I produced a book called Deep Faked, and it is on Amazon.com. And the whole purpose of it was to describe how we are already in a deep faked reality and always have been. But let's play some more here.
Yeah.
Get me a nice blonde wig.
Yeah, that's what we used to do. We hand out rubber noses and googly eyes. Yeah. Then nobody would see us coming.
Like Clark Kent.
Yeah. No, we have a disguise unit at the agency, and I'm super proud of them. And I was the benefit of their expertise on numerous occasions, because you might guess, I mean, I'd spent almost all my time with the agency overseas in operations, and there's some places where I don't blend right in. And
Crazy.
so I know.
So they blended you just like on Team America World Police? Remember?
Yes.
Bro,
Maybe their whole purpose is to take these serious ideas that should be paradigm shocks, if you really explore their full ramifications, and just laugh about it. Just make it a big laugh fest, smoke a blunt, laugh, yuck it up, and you just reduce it in its import to nothing, which is how everything gets drowned out today. It's the sea of irrelevance, where now it's just another laughy thing. Next minute you're talking to Terrence Howard about how he's killing gravity and Jupiter craps out moons. I mean, the language he used, that was his language, that Jupiter defecates, that the planets are defecating, that the Earth was defecated out of the sun. So, like, okay, I'm just saying, you put all these concepts into the same bucket, and they all have equal weight. So here we are talking about our deep-faked reality, which has significant implications. The implications are that we don't know who is who on the world stage, and beyond that, just the fact that this has been out of sight, out of mind for so long, it's really the reason why it's the subject of a book. It's really a rabbit trail to really think about this stuff. But let's listen to these guys laugh it up a little bit more.
One of the greatest. Hans Briggs. Hans Briggs.
How good is
Okay. Matt X says, Stavely once called us penguin scumbags. I like that. Proud to be a penguin scumbag. Right? Ollie Goering says, penguins are too adorable to be scumbags, fishy-smelling, popcorn-munching waddlers. Wormy says, masks have been in use since or before Abraham Lincoln. Yeah. You know, the book I'm reading, In the Country of the Blind, and I'm going to probably do a review next week when I finish it. It's about this secret society that took over the dissemination of historical narratives. They hijacked history. It's like newsbenders, but it started way in advance. And according to this book, you know, it had its beginnings in the Civil War. And there are people who question the official narratives. It's like what William Randolph Hearst said about this. He's like, you provide the photos, I'll provide the war. And people believe anything. And the decoy operations are very well known. So we're talking about deep fakes with people, but what about inflatable tanks? What about wooden missile launchers, fake military bases, empty hospitals, testing tents that are empty, but on TV they can present these illusions. But this is a pretty fascinating topic, but it's also not even a conspiracy theory. I'm just like, why are these guys just laughing it up? I was hoping that they'd get a little more serious about it. Let's see if there's anything else I can extract from this interview.
In disguise, right? So it's dependent upon your bearing. I've seen people in disguise who don't pull it off well, right? Because they're worried, like, oh, I'm in disguise. People are thinking I'm in disguise. Nobody gives a shit. Everybody's worried about their own little bubble out there.
So it's your body movements and your body language.
Right. It's your bearing. How do you comport yourself? How do you carry yourself? Are you confident in it? And also, do you understand that the vast majority of people out there, no matter where you are, right? A fourth world country, U.S., wherever, they're not thinking about it, right?
Right.
And I've had extended conversations with people in disguise where, you know, they don't give a fuck. They don't know. And
right. That's another good point here. You know, these disguises. You know, I was looking at some videos by OMG, O'Keefe Media Group, formerly Project Veritas, and his disguise is to put on some glasses. That's it. Like glasses and a hat, barely anything. And it's probably true that the situational awareness of the average NPC is so low that they're not really going to notice you if you're out of context. And there is that as well. You know, I see someone who works at a certain store, but I see him out of context and I can't quite place them. It's all magic, you know, magic show, trickery. All right, let's see what else we have here. Catching up on your comments. Matt X says, let's see if JL will be wrong for the 4th year. Well, 6/11's coming up, so we don't have long to wait. And to me, it's not about right or wrong. We are reading the script, the meta script, the predictive programming, the foreshadowing. I don't get too spiritual about it, and he has a different take for sure. And we don't really cross that path because I'm just not convinced. Maybe I'm condemned because I'm not convincible. But whose fault is that? If I can't be convinced, then, because for me to accept it, I would have to lie. And I don't really want to have to do that. I don't want to have to pretend. I don't want to have to just go along to get along if I don't really mean it, because I think that's even worse. Because then if it's all true, then you're lying in order to get in. And so, no, I'll have to wait until something convinces me. And then something else, religions just seem to be intrinsically hateful. Like, they're always so hateful. I'm sorry, but they are. Find me a religion that isn't, and I'll take a look at it. But I'm not really a hateful person, so it doesn't even align with me. And the other side of it, too, is the labeling of the people who aren't part of it as somehow being deficient. It's like saved and unsaved, vaxxed and unvaxxed, us and them, and then both sides are paying their respective priesthoods. Okay, moving on. Wormy says Mag exposes all the T-Rainies. Oh yeah, no. Mag is a transvestigationologist. And one thing about transvestigationism is that it's borderline paraphilia. It's almost a fetish at this point. It's not science. It's not forensic anthropology. It's not falsifiable. And it's not that it's been debunked. It's that it's never been bunked. Some things have to be established before they have to be debunked, and they haven't provided a burden of proof, and they've had plenty of time. And the people who do this are so dishonest. They're like, oh, look, Sylvester Stallone is an old grandma now. And I'm like, that's a man. It's a biological male. And if you don't believe me, look at his portfolio. Look at his reel. Sylvester Stallone was doing nude stuff years ago. And then they'll say, oh, that's prosthetic or that's CGI. It's like, no, you don't get to move the bar. I present evidence. They're like, well, every president is the opposite of what they say. Joe Biden, Hunter Biden, those are women. I'm like, well, you can look at Hunter Biden's laptop, and there are 4,000 pictures of him. And if you're going to assert this, then you have to address that. It just doesn't match up. And then Stormy Daniels is in the news. And a lot of these people like Mag Truth will say Stormy Daniels is a man. It's like, well, Stormy Daniels is on video for like 40 years. She's like a veteran adult actress. And so I say, well, you have to confront the evidence. And then they'll conveniently say, oh, we don't watch that kind of stuff. Well, you aren't looking at the evidence. You're in no place to say it's not real. Sort of like the people who won't look at mass shootings or terror attacks who say it's real. No, you can't say it's real without looking at the evidence. You're a low information believer. You don't know. And in this case, it's the same thing. Bad argumentation. So yeah, you have to prove it right first. I don't even go there anymore. I just realize it's dishonest. The whole group of people, it's become a dishonest witch hunt. Wormy says gait differs male and female. Yeah, they all act like they're experts. Like they can look at a picture of someone, how they're walking, and they can say, I know. Like it's a false claim of expertise. And the thing is, if you really believed it, this would be like world shattering. This is like a big deal. And some of these claims are so tall, but none of the people who proclaim this stuff come out in the open and really talk about it. Mag might be one of the few. Most people are anonymous. So you're anonymous here, and you're saying Hunter Biden's a woman. Like, you have no credibility with me. But it's an absurd proposition. Like, all dogs are cats. No, they're not. You have to provide something first. And this idea that, again, the gait, the walking, and one other point, they're always wrong, and they never admit when they're wrong. They just move their explanation. So if it's not falsifiable, we can just reject it. So it's a time waster. And I questioned one of the major pushers of transvestigationism. Her name is Bevy112 on Twitter. And she blocked me. Like, you blocked me, and I'm just asking questions. So I look into this person, and, I'm pretty good when it comes to doxing. It turns out that this person who pretends to be a Christian church lady type, convinced that the world is in the throes of a satanic cult, who spends all day trying to convince people that Matthew Perry's a woman. Turns out this person is presenting a false front, that this person is actually a communications professor at some community college in Iowa and voted for Bernie Sanders. Total leftist, communist. So you have this leftist, communist, college professor pretending to be a transvestigationist YouTuber and Twitter channel. Totally fake. An operative is what I'm saying. It's a psyop. Ollie Goering says, I believe Trump's a woman. Yeah. A lot of them do. And again, what is their evidence? Their evidence is how they walk, I guess, based on selected pictures. Kanye West. I mean, it's all of them. I looked into it, though. I looked into their claims, and I think that the whole premise of it is possibly muddying the waters, if anything. But yeah, all American presidents are women. Joe Biden's a woman. Like, I can't make myself believe that without more tangible evidence. Okay, let's move on. And you have to play fair, too, also. If you're going to say this is the case, then it applies to all sides, both sides. So if you're going to say Michelle Obama, then you got to say Melania. And a lot of them do. But again, they're all wrong about it. If you question these people, they immediately go after you. So Bevy112 started telling people that I am a EGI is what they call you. I'm an EGI. I'm elite. I'm an elite gender invert. That's what they call you, an EGI. I'm part of the club. I'm like, really? I'm this deep undercover in disguise, and I'm working for Super Chats. Like, how elite is that? Dinah South says, don't look at dead rubber babies. Yeah, exactly. You have no business saying that you believe that a bunch of children got killed here if the evidence doesn't support it, and you're not willing to look at the evidence because you have a weak stomach. And that's one of their tricks. They'll say, look away, it's very graphic, very sad. And you look, and again, you have these rubber babies lined up like sardines. And it's like, okay, what kind of bomb can kill a bunch of babies like that without doing any physical damage to them? And then their eyes are closed and their mouths are closed, which again, just basic facts about dying. When you're a corpse, your eyes stay open, your mouth stays open. And you know what I see, and this is just a cliche, you see it in all movies. Somebody dies in a movie, someone else comes along and they close the eyes by passing the hand over. Very touching gesture, but that doesn't work. That's not how it works at all. You would need glue or an insert, a plastic insert, in order to get the eyelids to remain closed. I just saw this in a movie. I called it out the other night. I was watching the end of A Man in Fool, and when the Trump guy's dead, the other guy comes in and closes the eyes. Sorry, it doesn't work that way. Alright, Wormy says, you're saying Michelle's a female LMFAO? You gotta be kidding, dude. You can believe what you want to believe. You can spend all day imagining you see something between Michelle Obama's legs on videos. And I've seen these videos where people are watching, they're zooming in. I see it, I see it. You can spend all day looking at Hunter Biden's naked pictures. Do what you want to do. It's like MAGA porn. It's all there. But you don't know it to be true. It's merely something that you believe because the internet told you. But if you're going to assert that, I think you're going to have to say that Melania too counts. Let's see what else we have here. All right, let's move on. Look, transvestigationism, I just want to point out, at this point. I think it's borderline fetishism. It really is. It's like phrenology. It's a pseudoscience at best. So let me ask Wormy one question, since you're the resident transvestigationist. Is Donald Trump a woman? Because this whole theory that everybody is flipped, EGI theory, is what you're asserting, and so it has to be consistent. Sylvester Stallone, woman? Okay. I wasted enough time with this group, and they have no credibility. You're entitled to your opinions, as absurd as they may be. And look, it's an opinion. Okay, moving on. We talked about the helicopter. The numbers, one more time, let's go over these numbers. The helicopter has the number 1136. Out of that, I see 113, 311, 911, 119, 116, and 611. Speaking of 611 and 116, let me play this short clip from the ending scene of the Batman movie, the monologue.
Wednesday, November 6th. The city is underwater.
Wednesday, November the 6th, the city is underwater. So the Batman movie ends with an 11:06 Gotham underwater. This correlates strongly with all of the 11:06 symbolism associated with the right-wing domestic violent terrorist extremist thing. 11:06, 6:11, Timothy McVeigh, etc. But the Batman movie reinforces it, and again, this had the Riddler in it, who is Q, the guy with all the questions, and the radical online army ready to act to flood the polls, to disrupt the election. Jay Digg says the election this year is Tuesday, November the 5th. 11:05. Okay, someone pointed out too, I think V for Vendetta. When does it take place? Does it take place in 2020 or 2025? Or does it say? Some say it's 2025. I'll have to look into it again. But V for Vendetta is all about November the 5th. Alright, Wormy says they're all lab-made creatures. It may be that they're all lab-made creatures, but I'm just not on board with the whole fake forensics, because it's a flawed methodology is my problem. And it's a huge time waster. Ollie Goering says, isn't BitChute owned partially by Google? I don't really get on BitChute very much, because it's just full of too many the types of people that are there. It's very 4chan-y, but there are a lot of good content creators that upload there, and all of our videos get automatically exported. So I never promote it, but if you go to BitChute/Infinite Plane Society, you can actually find all of the content here. Alright, let's move on. By the way, if you're not following me on Twitter, it's IPS Think Tank. We have a live stream there, and all the archives show up there as well. Right now we have about 26 or 27 people there. Let me just run through my feed. Okay, Terrence Howard says he proves gravity is an effect, not a cause. We talked about Terrence enough. Tucker Carlson denies reports that he's launching his own TV show in Russia. So that was just a rumor. Zelensky is now a dictator in Ukraine since his term officially expired and he canceled elections. The rise of Christian nationalism. These guys are all Matt Walsh clones. I think these are all posts. I think it's a parody of extremism. But here you have Joel Webbin suggesting that we need to add the Apostles' Creed to the Constitution.
Of the Constitution. Right. Absolutely love it. If there was anything that I would do to the Constitution at all, if revival swept through the land, or we got an American Caesar and he was Christian, and through him and the law of God and its second or third use functioning as first and third use, revealing the wickedness of the people, and then gospel preachers and churches doing their ministry, and a bunch of people get saved, and we say, hey, you know what, we want to set things straight because there was a lot that was good in our founding, but a little bit was missing. One of the first things that I would advocate for is not even changing the Constitution, but simply adopting to the Constitution a preamble of like the Apostles' Creed.
Right. All right, the Apostles' Creed attached to the Constitution. That's nice. Christian nationalists are very much promoting these types of ideas all the time. Nothing new here. I just think it's fake, phony parodies of extremism. I don't think they actually believe any of it. Joe Fiore says Tim doesn't auto-hoax when it comes to gender. No, okay, here, when I'm analyzing media, I don't automatically disbelieve. Automatically disbelieving is not skeptical. It's just as bad as automatically believing. And what I'm saying is that when you're suspending judgment, you're waiting for more facts. So I did look into this. I have studied forensic anthropology. In fact, I took a course, part of my 92 mic training, which is mortuary affairs at Fort Lee, Virginia, at a Pierce Mortuary College, where part of the course to graduate, to pass, you're given a box of bones, and you have to assemble the skeleton, and you have to determine its race and sex, and which patella goes to which leg, and there's a trick to find out where the kneecap goes on which leg, and it's like this whole thing. So I have a little bit of a background in it, but what we see with the people online, they'll say, oh, this person's brow line looks like this, therefore, and they draw these erroneous conclusions. So it's okay to believe what you want to believe, but if you believe it for erroneous reasons, then what's the point? Why should you have to engage in self-deception or ignore fallacious reasoning? And what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to get away from that. I don't need any of that. What I'm trying to get to here is a place of objectivity to analyze the world's major deceptions as they're presented to us. And you can't do that if you haven't inoculated yourself against all of their tricks. Okay, let's see if else we have anything here. Stu Peters has a documentary coming out very soon, and it's going to be on Tartaria, which is kind of interesting. It's almost like there's a repeat of a lot of the memes that were pushed in 2015, 2016. We're seeing a lot of the same stuff. That's why Q's making a huge comeback. Lord Laney says, I'd like to hear a call from Quincy or Lynn's Savage. Yeah, I'll reach out. In fact, I want to meet up with Quincy, and he said he would take me on a flight. And of course, Quincy's a pilot, and he doesn't claim to see any curve at all. And let's see. And Lynn is a MSM Plus. In fact, I got a comment from Lynn on one of my blogs today. Let me go ahead and pull that up if I can. I do read all the comments. I don't miss anything, so if you're commenting on any of the blogs, I'll generally get to it. So let me go ahead and get to the latest comments on the IPS blog. Here we go. Lynn commented on your post here. I think there's some sarcasm. Do some gematria and microanalysis of symbols and numbers on this narrative. And what narrative is it? I'm pretty sure it has to do with lockdowns. Italian restaurant owner rejected lockdowns and mandates.
Now answer my question.
I'm not vaccinated. Are you?
I am. How about your parents, your wife, your kids?
You were hesitant.
No, I got vaccinated.
Okay, Mel, my take on it is this. Because what Lynn is suggesting is that microanalysis of symbols is missing the point of the real oppression, the real issues that we're being oppressed. I don't think we're being oppressed. Half the people wanted the lockdown. The other half pretended they didn't want it. I mean, prove me wrong. Was anybody here really put off or mad about it? I mean, I know there's certain inconveniences, but show me a real victim. A lot of people advocate on behalf of supposed victims, like the children, Save the Children, or all the mom and pop shops that were shut down. You're speaking on behalf of people you presume to be victims, and are they? I think I'd need some more direct information. I'm not a victim's advocate here, but I'm trying to reject the anti-position as like the default position to take. And I don't think that the symbol analysis or the metascript breakdown or really psyop breakdowns is what we're doing. We're looking at psyops as psyops. I think that that is far more advanced than just reacting angrily because some restaurant owner had to close down. Like, I don't really care about the anti-position. I would also argue that the anti-position is just as much Team Fauci as the pro-position. Two sides of the same coin. It's an InfoWar position. I'm not in the InfoWar. You can call me a coward for being a conscientious objector because I don't want to go down and hurl memes at the other side, because I don't, or maybe you could say that I'm too calm about it because I don't have a bug out bag and I'm not ready to run for the hills. But in my opinion, if you think the world's about to end, if you feel threatened, if you think World War III is imminent, then they have you. They need you in that position of it's all about to go kinetic. It's all about to get scary. They need you to feel personally threatened by what you're seeing on the screen. It's like the Bible, in the hands of a fire and brimstone preacher. They need the believers to be terrified, to feel like we're in the end times. And look, I'm rejecting that. I absolutely reject it. Okay, let's continue. Ollie Goering says, no, races don't exist. I guess Tamil women are all dudes because they all have prominent ridges. Well, that's another thing, too. When I mentioned the course there at Fort Lee, Virginia, we were given categories. And, like Caucasoid, Mongoloid. They had categories. And these descriptions or these categories represented, generalizations about different characteristics that you would find across entire spectrums of the population, and a lot of these are just traits that are easy to point out as normal for that particular group. And so, yeah, there's differences. And the Transvestigation people have one skull overlay. They have one skull overlay they use for everybody. And I asked them, which skull overlay is this? Is this Caucasoid? They don't have an answer. So they're not even trying to be honest about it. Nick Fingar says, Tim, would you consider putting your name in the hat for a final experiment, all expense trip paid to Antarctica to see the 24-hour sun? Oh, sure, I would go. I would definitely go down to Antarctica. I don't believe Antarctica is a big perimeter of naval ships with guns pointed at you in case you try to escape. I don't think that the regulations are so intense that you can't get there. Like, there are so many excuses people make for not finding additional information, for not heading deep south. All right, let's see here. Jay Digg says, Mike D, pretty sure 614 was the original Jurassic date for Seattle. Then sometime between 2020 and 2021, it became 611. See, I think 611 makes a lot of sense because 9/11, 6/11, terrorists from outside, domestic terrorists, those from within. As far as the script goes, it would be very consistent for it to be a 6/11. But yeah, that's coming up. So whatever your take on JL's explanation, it's coming up. And think about this too. It's not like he's wrong. It's not like any of the stuff is necessarily mistaken, or like it's just too obvious at this point. Donald Trump hanging out at a rally, leans to his left because of a wobbly podium, and happens to pose in such a way that it looks like he was just hit or shot. There's like a blood splatter behind him, and the podium is, it has Kennedy on there. No, JFK. No, it has Lincoln, who had headshot, and Reagan, who was shot by John Hinckley. Then he had his bizarre 33-second blackout for some reason at the NRA meeting in front of the two crossed rifles. So there is quite a lot there. Ted Stryker says, did you see anything weird when you went to the Corona field? Yeah, Roswell's weird, if you've ever been there. It's aliens everywhere. They have this like Baphomet alien thing. It's like this big, tall alien holding a Dunkin' Donuts sign, and it's just very breasted for an alien. But yeah, the whole place is strange. I was able to go inside of that funeral home there, where they supposedly brought the alien after the crash. I picked up a body from there when I was doing transporting. Okay, let's move on. If you're looking at the screen, you have some chemtrail activists. They really hate the fact that airplanes are modifying the environment. These chemtrail activists hate the fact that we're being poisoned and that nobody's doing anything about it. It's like the world's dying in front of us because man's killing it with chemtrails and stratospheric aerosol injections and HARP, and nobody's fighting it. Nobody's doing anything. It's like the government won't do anything about chemtrails. So these brave chemtrail activists are blocking the roads. They're wearing orange vests and they're just laying in the roads right there to stop traffic. And this is to raise awareness about the gases, the emissions that are going to destroy us all. And look, they're just being roughed up, dragged off the road. They're not appreciated. And all they're trying to do is save the world and save us from environmental catastrophe. Like, what's wrong with this, right? This is good. Oh, wait, no, these are climate change activists. I'm sorry. Not chemtrail activists, they're climate change activists. Yet, ironically, they believe the same thing. They believe that man is destroying the world, nobody cares, and they need to stop everything so that we can pay attention to this imminent threat represented by our freedom and our CO2. Again, I just have to raise the question, why aren't chemtrail activists doing anything but griping about it on X? Chemtrail proponents are madder at non-believers than at the airplanes. Matt X says, everyone focuses on the South Pole but not the North Pole. I wonder if something's there like it shows on the old maps. See, I would get behind that. In fact, I would raise money for it. I would 100% get behind it. We need to send somebody. We need to send somebody here to the Black Rock. The Black Rock in the middle of the North Pole that was talked about by John Dee and Mercator in their maps. They had this exchange. They had a correspondence where they talked about this supposed 33-mile circumference map, or rather, this map that had a 33-mile circumference rock, 33 miles wide. Here we go. Mercator describes it at that size. Here we go. The Rupus Nigra Black Rock Phantom Island, 33-mile wide Black Rock. Mercator said its circumference was 33, quote, French miles, located at the magnetic North Pole. It purportedly explained why all compasses pointed this direction. The idea came from the lost work titled... Okay, so there's something else that he may have received this from. But this so-called Phantom Island was described by Mercator in a 1577 letter to John Dee. In the midst of 4 countries and a whirlpool of some kind. Anyway, do I believe this is there? Well, I can't just discount it. You can't just say, well, it's John Dee. Can't trust what he says because John Dee is a very important historical character. And you can't say, oh, we can't trust Mercator because we do rely on the Mercator projection. We recognize him as a voyager who is and a cartographer who mapped the stuff out. So why would we just suddenly say we can't trust him on this? And here's a picture of it. This is a detail from his Map of the Arctic, 1620 edition. There you have the North Pole and your 33-mile Black Rock. Wormy says 6/11 is just days away. Yeah, it's like counting down to Christmas at this point. Every year. Every year we get close to June, and we're getting ready. And there are a lot of people who are just there to, it's like doom hope. Maybe they're hoping it happens, and they're mad that it doesn't. They swear off of it, like, okay, I'm not paying attention to stuff again. And then 6/11 rolls around again, and they're ready for it. I'm looking at it with great interest because there is a substantial lead to this. There's a lot of build up to something. And I was looking at that date anyway because of this broader narrative, but then this adds a whole new element. So for those who aren't familiar with it, according to his read of the metascript, JL26 contends that on June 11th, Seattle is going to get Oppenheimered. It's going to get Oppenheimered. We're going to get EMP'd into nuclear winter. Winter is coming. It's going to be the frozen empire. And this will begin the next phase of things. And this will be followed up on 8/4 by the JFKing of Donald Trump. J Dig says 6/11 this year is on a Tuesday, which is Tears Day. Yeah, Tear or Tire, that's Mars. We also had 9/11 on a Tuesday. Aries 1 says Doom Hope, Dupium. Ooh, good one. Good one. Yeah, hopium's bad enough. Because, like they want something better and they're slowly degrading as they sit there waiting endlessly for this thing that's never going to come. Dupium is worse because they're hoping it all ends. Although hopium has a dark side. Because the hopium's like, yeah, we hope it gets better, but it's after we kill all the bad guys. So the Great Awakening is after all the Democrats get killed. It's actually that simple. The deep state is just code for Democrat. Matt X says, could it not be November the 6th, only Americans use month, day, year? Like the day after the election? Yeah, in a way, sure. I mean, it could be like we were looking at November the 3rd. We're like Seattle, ground zero, 11/3/2019. World War III kicks off. Didn't happen. 3/11, Seattle, ground zero, World War III. It happened. So we just had the dates reversed. So it is possible if 6/11's a nothing burger that it'll happen on 11/6. But it's far more consistent for it to be 6/11 for a lot of reasons. Aries 1 says, let them eat burgers. Yeah, red heifer meat, red heifer beef. We should have some kind of a barbecue of red heifers. Isn't that the whole thing in Israel? They think if they sacrifice a red cow, the world will end faster. Okay, let's move on. I don't have any doom hope, but I am very interested in plot twists. And this next thing promises to be bigger than 9/11. See, the thing about 3/11 is it wasn't branded that way. The predictive programming was all about 3/11. It really was. We can find just voluminous examples of predictive programming for 11 or 3/11 leading up to that thing. But nobody remembers it like the way they remember 9/11. And that's because it was just creeping. It wasn't like a spectacular event like 9/11, explosions, people dying, just falling from buildings, very dramatic. But 3/11 wasn't really like that. It was a slow creep, and there wasn't really a lot of spectacle outside of like Wuhan, with a few people falling on their faces. But it wasn't like that date was embedded in our minds. Even though they've used that date for this theme before. You remember Fukushima was the original 3/11 ground zero. Now, I'm thinking that this next thing, 6/11, will be a 9/11. It'll be a spectacular event, obviously. J. Dig says 11/6 is midway between the equinoxes and solstices. Yeah, another thing, everything is also based on their ancient calendars and their worship of the stars or whatever they do. New Year's Eve, dog star Sirius, the one that woke up Jim Carrey in the Truman Show, reaches its highest point and then it falls after midnight. So you're counting down the ball drop, you're actually worshiping Sirius. 9/11 is on the New Year's Day in the Coptic calendar. And we've talked about this before. If you remember the dog named Sirius, that was not only the dog that died on 9/11, but 1 year prior, on 9/11/2000, it was hanging out with Bill Clinton, who had a picture signed that said Sirius is beautiful. But yeah, it's always based on these dates. Okay, moving on. Scrolling through my minds.com/infinite plane society. We talked about the unknown falling man. Kind of got into that yesterday. Another 9/11 falling man. Really good photograph, but wasn't popularized because the photographer is something of a 9/11 truther. And I'm now convinced that all of the alternate explanations for 9/11 that involve bombs, like the things that the firemen were talking about, those are planted stories. Because the only thing that makes sense is that it was a controlled demolition dressed up with cinematography, with movie magic to make it look like more. There was no bombs, no direct energy weapons. It was a standard controlled demolition. It wasn't like explosives in the sense that it's being implied, like it was an inside job type of thing, and it was like a literal takedown through an explosion. No, it was a controlled demo. So these voices out there saying it was bombs, it was something other than planes, yeah, that's the controlled opposition narrative. It's the inside job narrative. They're insiders. They're being told to say this. Okay, moving on. We have a few more things. And I've been following some of these right-wing, far-right pastors and this rise of Christian nationalism because I think it's fake. I think it's phony. I don't know how many people actually believe this stuff, but they're setting a narrative tone here of religiosity, that there's some kind of white Al-Qaeda jihad about to go down. Let me play this clip.
He was seated at the right hand of the Father on high. And at that moment, the Father gave him the nations, and he set him above every authority and every name that is named in heaven and on earth and under the earth. Christ is Lord of lords. He is King of kings. He is the sovereign.
And, another thing I've also heard lately, a number of voices on the right are advocating monarchy. I heard that from Tucker Carlson, who said that we should probably have a monarchy, even though we don't believe in this stuff here. It would be great if we all could just agree on something. And I believe Nick Fuentes was talking about monarchy as well, that we should just crown Trump. Not a new thing. Here's an interesting one. Mark Robinson comparing Donald Trump to Abraham Lincoln. Like, who wants to be compared to somebody that had their head shot?
You go back and you look at the story of Abraham Lincoln, and it shadows the story of what happened to our last Republican president, who stood up to the status quo and stood up for everybody. And we had a news media that lied on this man from the day he stepped in office.
All right, there you have it. Trump is Abraham Lincoln. This is interesting. Lauren Witzke. I often remark on Lauren Witzke. She's one of these right-wing bomb throwers, always just on Twitter, kind of like Stu Peters. They do this thing where they say something sensible, like, hey, NASA's lying, maybe the Earth is flat, and they've got huge accounts. So you're like, oh, I'm just going to retweet it. And then their next tweet is just something horribly racist, just egregiously, like Stu Peters. Stu Peters does an image of himself dressed up like somebody out of Deliverance, and he's carrying a noose, walking through the woods. I'm like, okay, I just retweeted this guy because he made a good point about the fake ISS, and now he's talking about lynching. Anyway, Lauren Witzke is one of these, and someone posted one of her mugshots. Apparently, something about basically living in a $600 apartment and selling meth, and now she's a huge influencer on the far alt-right. And I think people like this get recruited. I think that these are all plants. Here it is. Stu Peters can't wait to start executing people. Now, it's kind of a weird picture, in my opinion. I don't know if those are his muscles or if he superimposed his head, but the rope is really big. Like, it's so thick, it makes him look small, like some kind of a munchkin. Very bizarre picture. I'm not intimidated. But he's got some kind of a rifle and a rope, and he's ready to go to work. Asteroid the size of the Pyramid of Gaza whizzed by. 5,776 inches. Okay, I believe we've covered pretty much everything I wanted to cover today. I'm trying to avoid certain topics, the JFK cult, but we're going to talk about them next week, just a heads up. On the 29th, on JFK's birthday, there will be a gathering of JFK worshippers at Dealey Plaza, which is in Dallas. So if you're in Dallas and you want to meet some true believers in this cult, like, I would consider going out there myself. In fact, if someone wants to go out there and do an interview on behalf of IPR, we would certainly facilitate that. Elephant Tusk says, how can any of this be real? It's not. Travis Cloud says, why does he have a noose on George Floyd's internet? Yeah, well, George Floyd, this is another one of these bifurcated psyops. Left wing says he was killed by oppression and systemic racism, and the right wing will say he was killed by fentanyl, enabled by Joe Biden's weak border policies. So they both fight over what killed him. Was it open borders or was it the cops? Neither the left or the right includes the possibility that George Floyd is alive and well, hanging out with the president of Iran, Kobe Bryant, Derek Chauvin, and they're drinking Coronas. Like, they don't include that in their realm of possibility. All right, well, today's 5/21/2024. We're just kind of catching up on things. There's a 9/11 video, an ISS video I'm working on. They're going to WTC7 the ISS, in my opinion, sooner than later. I don't have a specific date, but it's another one of these scripts that I've been following. And recently it was, I think, vindicated. If you recall, even in my 2020 publication, Metascript Decoded, I was writing in there about Genesis 1:19 and how this is all tied to this theme of the space station falling, representing like the Tower of Babel. Well, here we are, 2024. On January 19th, they released the movie ISS, which is exactly what you would expect. Russia, America dropping nukes on each other, the space station goes down. I'm like, wait a minute, 119? So the consistency shows that we're on the right track with our interpretations. Wormy says George Floyd is alive, fake death, same with JFK. I have trouble with the JFK being alive. I really do. I think it's patently absurd. JFK Jr. makes a little more sense. George Floyd is obviously alive. He's a terrible actor. He was saying, I can't breathe, when he was in the back of the SUV, which is very roomy, very breathable. He was saying that before they put him on the ground. And I think what happened is they did their rehearsals, he knew his lines, and he was nervous because it was all being done in one continuous shot. This is go time. I'm pretty sure this was produced by Spike Lee. If we had to say, who directed which psyop, yeah, Jordan Peele directed Jordan Neely's death, as Synchromorpheus determined. Spike Lee did this George Floyd. James Cameron did Rodney King. And the death of the I guess the environmentalist protester over there in Atlanta. But we can certainly point to the writers. The predictive programming does have human writers. We can point to them, and we can find out which directors are involved in this merging of the news and the movies. And James Cameron was there when Rodney King was getting beaten. He recorded it. It was in the background. They were at that site. Not a coincidence. Lean Dion says Stephen Jackson stuffed up his name once and called him Greg Floyd before correcting. Oh, his twin. Which doesn't make sense. George Floyd is 46, Stephen Jackson's 42, but they emphasized twin. In fact, we're going into Gemini. Is it right now? Stephen Jackson, a couple of things about him that are interesting. He was the last person to interview Kobe Bryant. And Kobe Bryant was part of the I Can't Breathe campaign, which really started with Eric Garner. So think about that. Stephen Jackson was the last person to interview Kobe Bryant on his show All That Smoke. And during that interview, they do the Masonic grip of the Master Mason. Just pointing that out. And yes, Gemini, May 21st, sign of the twins. And there's a couple of astronauts going up to space in some Boeing thing. The name Boeing just means disaster, so we're waiting on a space disaster. Maybe it'll happen this weekend. And let's see, there's something else. Have you all seen that Gemini mission patch? Where it looks like the Twin Towers, and it looks like they've even designated or marked on it where the planes are going to hit. Check this out. NASA Gemini. Again, Gemini twins. And then we've already talked about how Ground Zero when 9/11 happened, Ground Zero has the Stanley Kubrick 2001 Space Odyssey inspired hotel. A big Hilton that looks like a black monolith. And this is all foreshadowed in 2001 A Space Odyssey. That's how far back the predictive programming goes. But look in the Hilton logo. Like the Gemini patch, it's got twins and it has the impact zones highlighted. One of those things you can't unsee it once you see it. That's a sigil. It's a magical symbol. Commenter says, rather than The Simpsons predicting the future, wouldn't it be easier for the elite to just go through old Simpsons episode and design a psyop off an episode? I think The Simpsons is a terrible example of predictive programming because they're not so relevant, and who actually watches it? Like, there was a time, but these days there are too many episodes, and a lot of truthers are so full of truth that they make fake Simpson episodes. They create fake scenes and present it as, oh look, they predicted the future. But to answer your question, no, it wouldn't be easier. The purpose of predictive programming is simply advertising. Advertising works through repetition. If you see a product advertised a certain number of times, eventually you'll adopt it. That's the theory. Propaganda is the same thing. It's all about repetition. And to get you to accept an absurdity on the news, they have to bore the neural pathways in your brain early on. So people had we experienced quarantine, fear of the unvaccinated, fear of the unmasked. We experienced all that in simulation in our minds with every zombie movie we consumed. It's all quarantine programming. So many movies, like action movies from the 80s and 90s, always had exploding planes, like jet fuel. Somebody should give jet fuel a Grammy. It's one of these characters in all these movies. A very important point for all these movies, like this major plot twists are all about these big explosions. And so we are conditioned to see, jet fuel and planes as just bombs in the air, ready to blow up and melt things, melt buildings down. So they exaggerate everything in the movies for a long time. So when you see it on the news, you don't even question it. It just seems plausible. And it's not just the movies, obviously. It's the video games. On 10/6, Modern Warfare 3 gets released. Tens of millions of people, if not hundreds, are simultaneously immersed in a simulated war scenario. And then the next day, war breaks out, and most of the footage that goes viral is from video games, just like with Ukraine, Russia. 30,000 of the most popular video game, it's like 30,000 videos, the most popular videos related to Ukraine, Russia, combat videos, tanks and planes. Yeah, the most popular ones were from video games. It doesn't even, like, reality is so fluid these days. It's just based on just go with your opinion. It's choose your own reality at this point. Elephant Tusk says, from my understanding, Floyd was a scripted psyop, but it went off the rails beyond anyone's expectations with shit like 10 golden funerals. Yes. Twin Cities, Twin Towers, fascinating connections when you get into the twin stuff. Just really quick here, because he was kneeled on for 846. 846, asphyxiation. The sun set that day in the Twin Cities, 846. 9/11 kicks off at 8:46 a.m. So there's that connection. The significance of the sun setting ties into the ritual death of the Sun King at the setting of the sun and the dismemberment, and then he's placed into a golden casket. Yeah, the whole thing is just replete with symbolism. It's a very layered psyop. In fact, Space Odyssey 2001 does have a reference. There's a guy named Floyd talking about a fake epidemic as a cover story to conceal the discovery of some alien artifact. By the way, we're getting close to that anniversary in 4 days. That was 5/25. And on 5/24, there's a new Mad Max movie coming out called Furiosa. I saw a trailer for it when I went to see the Civil War movie. Now, Civil War movie, it's basically Trump's getting killed. And at the very end, they specifically allow a black woman to kill Trump. So it's just some sort of revenge fantasy, sort of like that Julius Caesar in the park they did, in Central Park, where they killed a guy that looked just like Donald Trump. Nothing new here. A Man in Full, Tom Wolfe novel turned into a Netflix TV series, 100% based on Trump, and he dies. So they're getting us ready for something. But this Furiosa comes out on the 24th, and the main thing about it, and the reason why I bring it up, I think it ties in because it's a female protagonist. And I think this may pertain to the female soldier that kills Trump at the end of the movie. Furiosa Mad Max Saga, just by looking at the trailer, that's kind of it. This is like, here's The Fury is Born. Last year it was Barbie Feminism. This year it's going to be Furiosa. By the way, there's a Twister movie coming out this July, a tornado movie. And we just had some big tornado stories. And I'm not saying tornadoes are fake, but what I am saying is that they can be embellished, they can be augmented, they can be blamed on Republicans, which is what they generally do with any kind of inclement weather. JC, have you finished Country of the Blind? I'm like halfway through. You know, I'm like that meme where the guy's walking with his girlfriend and then he sees another woman and he's looking at her and then his girlfriend looks at him. But the girl walking by is the next book. Like, I'm reading one book and then I see this other book and I'm like, wait, I need that one. So I'm concurrently reading like half a dozen books. And I prioritize nonfiction. So I don't always get through fiction as fast as I would like to. But I'm going to finish this one within a few days, because it's too perfectly aligned with what we're talking about every day. A Country of the Blind by Michael Flynn, of all things. I mean, Michael Flynn, General Flynn, Q. And it has a reference to this Q file. The basic story, Country of the Blind, is about this reporter who finds out that our whole history is hacked. And that these reality hackers are this secret society are trying to kill her, and they kill all of her friends. Once they find out that they're all now more or less in the know about this secret technology for guiding human destiny. And I'm at the point in the book where she has the choice of dying or being recruited. And that's sort of the theme in the play Newsbenders, where the guy makes the point to say 98% of the population wouldn't understand this, the rest work for us, meaning that if you're in the know, you work for them. And that's kind of what this book is suggesting. But it's raising some interesting questions about the ethics of churning out propaganda and using memes in such a way that you reduce people's sense of reality down to like this consensus agreement on a delusion that maintains the most amount of peace, and it refers to them as techno peasants. That we're being dragged into something of a dark age, which I kind of tend to agree with. Not technological, but mentally. Brave New World. But this book is really interesting. It came out in 1990, and it has a lot of cutting edge concepts about memes, and some of the terminology there shows that the author was ahead of his time, ahead of Richard Brody's Virus of the Mind. But again, it's raising some interesting questions, and it also has this strange parallel with the IPS, because this protagonist has her own group who are, in their own way, trying to do something like what this group is doing, influencing the future by elucidating, shining a light in certain things. And in a way, I see these parallels, but it's just strange to me that it's just so close. I mean, we're the only ones every day talking about Newsbenders, and I find a book about it. Something of an obscure book. I found it in a used bookstore. I do find that used bookstores are like very conducive for synchronicity. Like, I think there's something about the randomness that accompanies a thrift shop that makes certain things more likely. Like, I think that there's this phenomenon with synchronicity that has to do with intentionality and choice, making decisions. But when you go into a big, like, major chain bookstore, well, everything is pretty much going to be the same everywhere. Nothing's random. Certain books are there because they make so much money. Nothing there is random, and it's completely different. It's far more controlled. And I think that when it's more random, you're more likely to have opportunities for synchronicity, for messaging, for information to arrive through happenstance, coincidence. It's the disorder. And that's kind of the premise behind the magical philosophy of chaos magic. That you have to create the chaos to enable access to alternate possibilities, or specifically improbable possibilities. Lean Dion says the X-Files episode The Lone Gunman hijacked plane just misses towers. Yes, and The Lone Gunman is another example of concurrent programming. Collateral Damage. You know, we could do a whole episode, maybe a whole week on it, of various movies that and books and scripts that had to change after 9/11. Like Collateral Damage. I mentioned this before. Arnold Schwarzenegger, the Terminator, the Destroyer, was at the scene of 9/11 in the form of a billboard image of his face. Collateral Damage. In fact, there's this pretty famous clip where a handheld camera is, for some weird reason, looking at that billboard, and you see an explosion on the tower behind it. Now, that is all part of this big ritual theater, because Arnold Schwarzenegger, Collateral Damage, the movie had to be changed because of so many ways that it resembled 9/11. So here you have a billboard for it, multiple, around Ground Zero, and the movie gets delayed for like a whole year. Francis Ford Coppola's new movie, Megaopolis, also had 9/11 stuff in there that he had to take out. But again, 9/11, Revelation 9/11, The Destroyer over the Abyss, The Destroyer, The Terminator, Arnold Schwarzenegger, all very much scripted. But Lone Gunman is another really good example. And fascinatingly, one of the characters, Vess Adele Harlow, their name is an anagram for Lee Harvey Oswald. The significance here, 9/11 and the JFK assassination in the same context. Well, they have the same director. Kubrick did 9/11. Kubrick did JFK. It wasn't Oswald. It's just an actor. The director, though, would be Kubrick. I think I would attribute a few more things to Kubrick as well. 2020 was definitely a huge part of his work. The JFK assassination, yes, I think that would definitely be his. And that's why this JFK Jr. thing is interesting, because I think that was definitely fake as anything else. It's just interesting how it's become sort of like fake and real to the Q crowd. Ted Stryker says, why would they want to hold off 9/11 predictive programming if that's what they always do? Well, here's the thing. Before the event happened, it wouldn't have been recognized as predictive programming. But if it comes out after, then it looks bad. So for example, Donnie Darko, which also was released on a 119, Falling Planes, all kinds of predictive programming, its release and its marketing materials were all hampered by 9/11 because it's like politically incorrect after that point. Like if you remember that day on 9/11, a lot of radio stations were banning a lot of songs like TNT by AC/DC, Free Falling by Tom Petty, because of the jumpers. So they made a big deal about being super sensitive about it. But anything that came out after 9/11, in the wake of 9/11, was suddenly having to be somewhat edited. Like here's an example. Donnie Darko was released the month after 9/11 and prominently features a plane crash. Not a great way to draw an audience. Now, I mentioned the JFK and 9/11 connection in Kubrick. Kubrick's also a NASA connection because of Apollo 11. Interestingly, the director of Donnie Darko's father worked for NASA on the Mars Viking rover program. So father works for NASA making their movies. Son creates a movie with 9/11 predictive programming. But that's why. It's almost like, oh, your predictive programming didn't make it on time. And something else to consider is that these themes might be disseminated by intelligence agencies. That these directors are being told, yeah, this is the theme. And they wouldn't have to know very much more than that. Like, let's say hypothetically, the director of Collateral Damage was told, you need to have scenes with planes being hijacked, attacking New York, etc. So he does it. The movie comes out a little too late, so they have to change it. Well, he may have been told to put that message there, but he wouldn't necessarily have been told because we're going to fake it. Like, I think the level of fakery is on a need-to-know basis, capstone level. Like, we're not supposed to know this. Truthers generally don't know this stuff. Elephant Tusk says, the band Explosions in the Sky released an album on September the 4th. A plane on the cover says, this plane will crash tomorrow. They got in a lot of trouble with the 9/11 thing. Lean says, another talk with crypto crubology would be fire. Yeah, I need to speak with him again. I want to talk about that and Synchromysticism. In fact, I did some research on this concept. You see, this predictive programming has been noticed for a long time, but it hasn't been properly understood until the last year. Synchromysticism has always been disinformation. It has always been an erroneous explanation that leans on the divine fallacy, and its purpose has been to obfuscate the real purpose to all of this pervasive predictive programming. The reason why we have the predictive programming is to make it real, to advertise it to us. Again, boring those neural pathways, drilling it into our minds. It's advertising and propaganda. It's worldview reinforcement. There's nothing mystic about it. But if you think it's mystical, then you take it away from the political. Then you miss it. Then you've been misdirected from perceiving what is really going on. But crypto-crubology has been around since the beginning of Synchromysticism, like early 2000s. And they focused mostly on Kubrick. But many of the people who are into it aren't conspiracy theorists or don't recognize that this is beyond just wild coincidences and some eccentric director. And also the hyper focus on Kubrick it's kind of a straw man. Like, we're not saying Kubrick faked 9/11 and he felt bad so he dropped some hints in The Shining. No, that doesn't make any sense. He's part of the department that fakes all of reality. And if you look at it objectively, The Shining contains predictive programming for 9/11. And this is consistent. I mean, considering that the sequel to The Shining, Doctor Sleep, is about a child who predicts 9/11. So even Stephen King is in on this. Ollie Goering says maybe it's their comms. To the audience, it's to prime the subconscious. Yeah, it's both. It's to program the audiences into the loosh factory to get them to believe it. You nailed it. But at the same time, those who are in the know will know it's fake. Like, a few days before 3/11, I said World War III starts on Wednesday. And I said it with the full expectation it would be fake, whatever they were going to do. Same thing with this Trump thing. Yeah, it's going to be fake. The predictive programming only predicts the fake. What the synchromystics think often, or what the general truthers think, is that when they show us the stuff, it's because they have to tell us what they're going to do. No, they're not telling us what they're going to do. They're telling us what they're going to fake. Wormy says spraying is happening. You're bearing false witness. Nobody's spraying anything. That's the logical fallacy. What are they spraying? It's like, well, who's to say it's a spray? And if it was a spray, where is it stored? How much volume is required to make a trail for 50 miles? Is there even a big enough plane to do that? It's not a spray. It's hot air interacting with cold temperatures at 25,000 feet. If you're saying they're spraying, you're lying. You're applying the logical fallacy of a loaded question. And this is the lie world order. You could say it's Satan's world. And if you want to, basically adhere to Satan's operating system, then use logical fallacies. Promote bad argumentation. Spread fear, baseless fear and paranoia. Spread illusion. Be a propaganda mule for Big Brother. Or don't. But words matter. Words are like spells, but words do matter. And when you say what are they spraying or they are spraying, you're lying. It'd be like when you're saying what are they spraying, you're loading the question with the presupposition that something is in the plane that is being squirted out, spraying out, and that we don't know what it is. That there's a substance. You're asserting a substance. But there is no substance. There is hot air. And it's almost like a demon. It's almost like an imp has possessed some people about this. Like, they will not address facts. They will not follow the reason. They will not drop the logical fallacies. They're just like, no, there's a spray. There's a spray. Okay, fine. Believe it, but why aren't you wearing a mask? If you believe you're being sprayed with poisons like a bug, then why aren't you wearing a mask? Why isn't your dog wearing a mask when you take him on a walk? You let your children outside to get sprayed with poison? Like, you're just very negligent. You're a terrible parent and a terrible friend. If you really believe that people are being sprayed from the airplanes with bug poison for humans and you're not protecting them. Same thing with the people who believe that 5G towers are human bug zappers. Like, where's your helmet? So no, spraying is not happening. You're lying. And that's just the politest way I could say it. Like, you're wrong. Yeah. There's evidence to suggest you're wrong. You're advancing a logically fallacious argument. How can I not say that you're lying? Sorry, but you're lying. You can debate me if you want. I'm telling the truth. Ted Stryker says Slayer released on 9/11. Yes, Slayer released God Hates Us All. And they had posters everywhere that said God Hates Us All plastered around Ground Zero. God Hates Us All, 9/11. And one of their opening tracks, God Sends Death, is about a man-made virus infecting the world. So you've got 2020 kind of encoded into that. And I think there's an album by 311 that has a big sun corona on it that came out, and it's called Chaos. JC says, so amazing to be open to synchronicity. I found many random things connect and show me things like finding the show. Yeah, synchronicities are intriguing to me all the time. I was looking at this video before I came in here, and it was one of these videos about your thoughts and intentions, and the person coined the phrase moneyfestation, like manifestation, but it was about money, suggesting that if you focus on the lack of money, that the way the universe works is you'll manifest a continued lack of money. So you have to rewire yourself to be someone who lives in abundance even when you don't. And so it's kind of a paradoxical thing. But in this video, this person suggested that you write yourself a $10,000 check, that you do these actions that might feel strange, but that you're doing it to purge yourself of any attachment to the status quo. So I'm listening to this podcast, and as I'm walking into the office, I see on the ground, crumpled up, a little wad of cash. And I'm like, that's kind of weird. So someone must have reached into their pocket for their keys or something. And so there's like $7 on the ground. And I'm just listening to a podcast where I hear the phrase manifestation. So what do I do with this? What do I make of that? Coincidence, I guess. Commenter says, I thought the chemtrail started because some planes use compressed air instead of gas. Yeah, I've heard that theory about compressed air engines, and that might explain these egregious trails. But the phenomenon of anthropogenic cirrus clouds is just too easily explained. It has nothing to do with anything more than hot air, hot exhaust, high altitudes. And this is the main issue. Chemtrail proponents ignore contrails. You have to debunk contrails first. If you're going to say the sky is pink, you've got to debunk the blue first. You don't just get to come in here and say the sky's pink. You shill. No, I'm not a shill. You've got to first bunk pink sky. I don't have to debunk it. And before I have to debunk chemtrails, you have to prove they exist. And before you do that, you have to debunk contrails. So there's a lot of homework that you would have to do. Sci Obstacle says, way to go, moms and dads. You let your kids get sick by playing under the sky. Dominic says, why do they have to tell us it's fake? I don't get it. See, they don't have to tell us it's fake. That's what the conspiracy theorists say. They have to tell us what they're going to do to get our consent. And that's not what they're doing. All they're doing is they've blurred the lines between the news media, which has an agenda of establishing a consensus worldview for 8 billion minds. This is such a monumental task that it can only be accomplished by moving us into an immersive illusion where everything reinforces that. This is the one world religion. It's the new monotheism. It's a monolithic worldview, and it's created by this synthesis between entertainment and your news programming, and it's all programming, and it's all there to cement the history as they write it. Lean says, Crow's vinegar remedy. Yes, Crow 777 has painted himself into a corner because he is now a liar. And I don't like saying that flippantly, calling somebody a liar. You have unwitting liars and witting liars. So somebody who knows they're lying is worse than somebody who doesn't know. And it doesn't always make a difference to me at this point because the information is there. So if you're not willing to know, or you're closed-minded, or you're boxed in, you're now a liar. Like, the mainstream dupes are all liars. The world stage makes liars out of them. There's just, again, different degrees of intentionality. But Crow 777 is an interesting case here because he has fallen for one of half a dozen logical fallacies that are attached to chemtrails. And that's the logical fallacy of faulty causality, which means A happens before B, therefore A causes B. Like, that's not true. It's not always true. And just because you boil vinegar and then the contrails disappear doesn't mean your vinegar made them disappear. So there's this cause and effect relationship that's being asserted fallaciously. So he's stuck with that. He has to believe for the rest of his life that he can turn the skies blue by boiling vinegar because he can't admit that he's promoting a falsehood, intentionally or not. If he can't do it because of ego, that's one thing. If he won't do it because he's lying, that's another. But in either case, it's not acceptable. Like, he can't be considered a truther as long as he's going to be promulgating misconceptions and lies. And something else I find highly questionable about it is that he made his name as the moon wave guy, the lunar wave. So the lunar wave is simply, he's recording the moon at night, and randomly sometimes the whole moon will have a line go through it, like it's refreshing. Like a line goes through the moon like a wave. And this has led many to believe that the moon is a hologram. Now the thing is, there's a very well-known explanation for the lunar wave. The lunar wave is caused by wingtip vortices. An airplane flies by, it disturbs the atmosphere, and if you're recording the moon through the atmosphere that is being disturbed, you get a wave. So lunar waves are caused by wingtip vortices. Crow 777 apparently doesn't know this, or he's being tricked, or he's tricking himself. Believe what you want. I find it hard to believe that somebody with that many years of experience in photography would fall for some of the things that he seems to be falling for. But here's another thing that I find a little curious. Crow instability. In aerodynamics, the crow instability is an inviscid line vortex instability, named after its discoverer, S.C. Crow. You can observe the crow behind aircraft when wingtip vortices interact with the trails, producing distortions in the shapes. So if you look at the condensation trails behind some planes, they form these strange patterns. They get broken apart. Well, that's the interference caused by the wingtip vortices, the crow interference. My connection here is crow interference disturbs the contrails. Crow interference causes lunar waves. The lunar wave was discovered by a guy who calls himself Crow. The same guy, the same name as the guy who discovered this effect, or coined the name, discovered the cause of it. So again, what are the odds? Crow 777, Crow instability. I don't know, seems a little fake. Seems like he might know what he's doing, and it's not all that truthy. Commenter says, intent is irrelevant when it comes to lie and it has the same effect. Yes. Yeah, and look, the tell lie vision, not just a cliche. It is telling a lie. It lies by omission. It conforms more than it informs. It's not a truth detector in any way. It's totally subjective. So the people who believe it implicitly, without question, are turned into liars. Believers are liars. That's why I'm saying that the skepticism that we introduce here is an act of moving away from believers, because believers are all liars. Someone in the comments is like, they're spraying us, they're spraying us. No, they're not. You're actually lying. And I have to be here to tell people that they're liars. I have to be the accuser in this case. And I'm doing so to raise the bar. Prove me wrong. Prove you're not a liar. If you're a Mandela affected person, it's perfectly fair for me to call you a liar. Now you're lying to yourself and then lying to others, but you're still a liar. But you're a different category of liar than, a con man, for example. Although lines are kind of blurred, when it gets into this because there's often a financial incentive behind promoting falsehoods. Ollie Goering says, Loosh from Conscientious Observers has the potential to backfire the reality curator's script. Yes, are you familiar with the concept of culture jamming? This was from a magazine years ago, but the idea was disrupting mainstream thought, guerrilla communication. Culture jamming is a form of protest used by anti-consumerist social movements to disrupt or subvert media culture and its mainstream cultural institutions, including advertising. So culture jamming is not new, but what I think what we're looking at here is more or less when people who aren't part of the script, people who aren't backed by big advertising money, manage to get their messaging in. A great example of this is Pepe the Frog. Pepe the Frog is an alt-right meme that was able to achieve prominence and go viral when somebody shouted out his name. Hillary Clinton was talking about how the right-wing Republicans are a basket of deplorables, racists, misogynists, xenophobes, and she's like, and they worship this green frog. And somebody in the background yelled out, Pepe. And Hillary Clinton looked up for a minute, and after that, Pepe the Frog now existed. And he was then branded a hate symbol. But that virality is something that you could call culture jamming. Again, Hillary Clinton helped manifest him. So that wasn't something that would have made it out there were it not for it being somehow bounced off of a mainstream event. They kind of jammed the signal. So what I'm thinking here is what we're doing does have some potential, if there is any, to jam this thing, to throw a wrench into the works. If there is any such a possibility, it's going to happen from us. And I'm very curious to see what can happen. How far can we go? Can we disrupt the script? Or do they have complete confidence that at some point they will censor and delete all those with inconvenient perspectives? That's why this lawsuit victory is so important, because we are punching Google, YouTube right in the face. I mean, that is mind control central. It's a way for the government to maintain its control over the flow of information when it comes to psyops. I mean, YouTube is basically there's a hand in glove relationship. You could say fascist. You could say YouTube's a prostitute for big government propaganda. But the point of it is, they did try to exclude us from their universe of ideas, because we are definitely outsiders here. So I see this lawsuit as an opportunity to punch them back in the face. And once that happens, maybe we'll see, how open this thing is, because this reality is rigged. The worldview is rigged. And is it something that can be modified, altered, disrupted? Can we be a disruptor? Can we induce a paradigm shock to the system? I happen to think so. I just don't know how long it can last. But I'm interested in the process. To me, this is something of an experiment. Okay, moving on. Truth Hurt says, I stopped listening to Crow a long time ago. New Age nonsense, plus he's behind a paywall. Yeah, I heard him get into an extended conversation with Owen Benjamin about CE. And after a few times, I'm like, okay, I can't handle this. And if you don't know what CE is, I considered it to be, I actually posited this to be an explanation. Hey, maybe the lunar wave is caused by all of your CE. You're having a caffeine overdose, and you got a shaky camera hand. Yeah, coffee enema. That's what he was on, and I was like, okay, I gotta listen to something else now. JC says, what's the latest predictions maybe coming up over the next few months? Mark your calendar for June 11th. Seattle gets the nuke. Mark your calendar for May 29th. The JFK cult will be at Dealey Plaza, expecting JFK to show up. So 5/29, 6/11. Any other dates anyone have here? I think the anniversary of George Floyd's death will be significant. It's going to be noted, and that's just a few days away. All right, let's see what else we have here. Yeah, Thirst for Truth, coffee boofing. Yep. And I'm not being hypercritical of people just because they choose to snort their urine to decalcify their pineal glands, or boil vinegar to make the skies blue, or imbibe coffee from the wrong end. Like, whatever you want to do, do it. I guess that's how it is today, right? Do what thou wilt. That's the new age. I just call out what I see to be hypocrisy. You know, truthers hold themselves to a higher standard. And if you're going to be a liar, then you're not a truther. And if you're a truther, you need to hold yourself to a higher standard. I'm not out there saying, hey, those cirrus clouds are going to kill you. The airplanes are spraying something. I know this is not true, so I don't say it. Okay, let's see what else we have going on here. Truth Hurt says, coffee boofing and juicing, but he looks rather unhealthy. Yeah, I don't take health advice from truthers, ever. Whether it's horse paste, iodine, or super male sex goop, whatever they're taking, I don't. I just look at the people who are, you know, the consumers of it, and does it look like it's helping them out? Now, 6/11, Seattle gets nuked. 8/4 is the date this is supposed to happen, but it can happen at any time. And again, you may not agree with JL26's take on things, but you cannot deny the facts as they're presented. The facts exist. Objective reality exists. And it is true that right before the eclipse, there was a 4.8 magnitude earthquake centered on Trump's golf course. 4.8 mag. So like MAGA, 4.8. The reverse of 8/4, of course. The predicted date for Trump to be in the crosshairs. None of this is shocking at all. Interestingly, JL also said that 8/4, you know, it's Barack Obama's birthday, and that Barack would be all over it. Well, Barack is all over Leave the World Behind, which was released on JFK's assassination date, 11/22. Has the zip code in it with the 1963 in it. So there's that. Then you had Brock Purdy, Super Bowl quarterback Brock Purdy, was compared to Lee Harvey Oswald. And I remember at the time thinking, that's just a bizarre thing to say. Why would they even make these comparisons? It's like, it's a good thing he doesn't look like Ted Bundy. Because it's just a bizarre and almost a rude question to ask. Brock Purdy, Lee Harvey Oswald. And what JL pointed out is that Brock is just a way of saying Barack. Lee Harvey Oswald, the one who shoots JFK. Barack, the one who, in this narrative, is going to be behind what happens to Trump. And in the movie I was just referencing a little while ago, A Man in Full, the mayor is 100% based on Barack Obama. And Charlie Coker is 100% based on Donald Trump. So you have this dynamic set up where, yeah, Donald Trump is there. You got Ivanka, Melania, Barron Trump is Wally, and William Jackson plays Wes Jordan, the mayor. This is Obama, and he's the one whose entire role, his entire purpose is to destroy the Trump character. So you have this Obama-Trump connection in this movie as well. So it's a repeated theme, and what I'm saying is that his, quote, predictions, his assessment is internally consistent and it has been very prescient, because as we move forward, more and more events occur that just seem to align with this reoccurring theme. That's why this stands out to me as highly significant, where Donald Trump is shown here leaning over, and look, he's an actor. This is season 34 of The Apprentice. Here he is leaning over, supposedly because the podium was weak. Well, maybe they just said, you need to do this. Like, you need to lean over, because right behind him, the way the flag is construed, it looks like he just got Kennedy'd. I mean, look at that. And yes, Graceland is going on the market. Graceland is being auctioned, and it looks like the White House. So there's your another weird Elvis connection to this whole thing. Ted Stryker says the weather is controlled. Sure. Well, the question here, climate and weather being two different things, but I reject the premise of it changing in any way as a result of man. But I also want to reject the premise that the right will accept, because they reject climate change. They'll say, well, it's changing because of solar flares. They'll have all these different explanations for why it's changing. It's like we can just start at, is it even changing? So many of these debates begin with each side accepting a faulty premise. This is where it's at. Says it's a weird pick. Etheric Bliss says Texas sharpshooter. Well, Texas sharpshooter fallacy would generally apply to a lot of these cases where people are making predictions with gematria calculators. But there's a big difference here. The big difference is they're firing off all kinds of shots, only ignoring. Basically, it's like you point out 50 facts, and then you group together the ones that are most likely or closest to what you're predicting, and you ignore where you are wrong. So the gematria calculator might be right about 5 things, but wrong about 50. Well, why do the 5 right things weigh heavier than the 50 wrong things? It really shouldn't. So you can build the false perception of accuracy. But when it comes to this Trump thing, it has been uncanny and entirely too consistent. And not only is it too consistent, but he's not drawing from a body of evidence going back years and years, but it's more like real time. And these appearances are just too conspicuous. So it's getting to be to the point where it looks like it's meta script as usual. Like this is a scripted line. And according to the prediction, it's going to take place in Ohio. And look, here's another example. Because it gets nuanced, but again, these are very specific. The guy who hates Trump more than anybody in the world, arguably, is Alec Baldwin. Totally Trump deranged. And they said, so you've been playing Trump on SNL. How does that make you feel? And he says, I want a meteor to hit the White House. Alec Baldwin wants a meteor to hit the White House. Later, Alec Baldwin is on the set of Rust, and he shoots a guy that has Trump's birthday, 6/14. Joel Souza, who doesn't die. Well, this is against the backdrop of Don't Look Up just coming out. Don't Look Up is about a comet about to hit the Earth. So this theme of Trump, the guy wants a meteor to hit Trump, and this movie is about the Earth about to being hit in 6 months, 14 days. So 6/14. It's sort of reiterated there. But the reoccurring themes of course, Trump, the shooting, the meteor, everything getting hit, some world-shattering event, the dates. It's been fairly consistent, and it's been building and building. Lean Dion says, currently, in A Man in Full, he's testifying to a sexual assault case. Yes, okay, A Man in Full comes out just in time to track along with Trump in court, and it's about a real estate magnate. And his company's got turpentine. They pronounce it like Trumptine. It's just too perfectly aligned. And they chose this movie. No, they chose the book by Tom Wolfe, and they made the movie for this purpose, for propaganda purposes. But when they made the movie, they must have had a crystal ball, because they knew when they released it, it would perfectly correspond to Trump on trial. How do they know that? How did the producers of Game of Thrones know that Roe v. Wade would be overturned and there would be protests just in time to release this new series where the queen is giving birth and has to die in childbirth because they need the male son because she's a broodmare for the state, even though she's the most powerful woman in the state? Like, they were making the point that it's very barbaric to turn back the clock on Roe v. Wade and all this stuff, and the movie comes out to reinforce it. How did they know? just what I'm saying here is that we can rule out coincidence, rule out supercomputers or AI, rule out the demiurge when it comes to explaining the predictive programming. It's literally programming. We're seeing programming. They are programming us, and on the collective psyche, it is being projected that Trump's going to be hit. So when it happens, and this is why I think Donnie Darkened, who's this Twitter account who's been talking about Trump as the Antichrist, I think that's why a lot of these accounts exist. They exist to prepare a lot of people who see this thing to process it in a certain way. They don't want anybody calling it fake. That's why Donnie Darkened went on Tim Pool. Why would Tim Pool give that guy a platform when all he does is he promotes predictive programming analysis of Donald Trump about to get whacked? He let him on because the guy says Trump is going to really get it, that it's all real. He's not an auto hoaxer. So the non-auto hoaxer perspective on predictive programming is always wrong because they assume it's predicting something that's going to happen for real. Totally erroneous. It's all fake. It predicts the fake. It's not gonna get kinetic. HLG says, is it the third year of Seattle Trump headwind prediction, or am I mandoozled? It's been a prediction for some time, and it would only make sense at this point to happen next month. If Seattle doesn't get nuked next month, I don't know how it makes sense after that. Now, as far as the Trump thing, it could happen anytime. I don't know why it would have to be 8-4, but it makes sense following his logic. And if you remember, like a couple of years ago, we were watching that very day. We're like, okay, let's watch August 4th. Is Trump going to get it? And if you remember, the president of the one of the unions named Trump with an F died on 8-4. So we get a lot of hints leading up to it. Now, I don't have doom hope or hopium, but I am just following the scripts. And look, we were on target with 311, 11-3. Like, we quite literally use predictive programming as a model to predict the future. And we predicted that World War III would kick off on 311, which it did. But the nuke thing, okay, we got Christopher Nolan and Jonathan Nolan, Oppenheimer, Fallout. When have we ever been so saturated with a theme or a message that wasn't followed by some counterpart in reality through the news? Never. Everything they show us is preparation for what they're going to do. So it's a safe bet. There's not going to be a plot twist. They're not going to change it because too many of us are noticing. No, it happens. It's just a question of how the masses are going to respond. Elephant Tusk says we are biological computers, hence the programming. Yet we are hackable animals. And we're not just hackable animals at the level of individuals, but we are collectively programmable. This is why I don't have a lot of patience or tolerance for collectivists who are like, I'm not an individual, I'm a hue. And you're a hue. You know, you're an ethnicity. You're a physical you're a meat suit, but you're a product of your physical body. There's no person, it's very soulless is what I'm saying. You know, it's very soulless when people get into this tribal stuff. Like my tribe versus your tribe, my race. Your race did this to my race, so my race gets something. It's like, give me a break. Prove reincarnation happens intra-racially. What if we flip? What if every time you're reincarnated, you're in a different race and a different sex? Then what do you do with all your grievances? Your grievances from, past crimes. How do you ascribe? To me, it's incoherent thinking. JC says, what is the ultimate goal of the programming? Status quo? Power? The billions are controlled by a handful who have a knowledge disparity, and they use this knowledge disparity, the inability of the masses to tell real from fake, to establish a priesthood to interpret reality for them. And the purpose of it is ultimately control. And it's not new. We're just really looking at the newest iteration of an ancient philosophy. Great example would be Polybius, who said, I believe, and this is a concept that has been referred to by Machiavelli, and then here Polybius, a Latin phrase inspired by Tacitus, instrumentum regni, the instrument of monarchy. And monarchy, monotheism, the monolithic worldview, it's all the same. But what is stated here is simply this. My own opinion is that, for the sake of the common people, it is the course which would not have been necessary if it was possible to form a state of wise men, but every multitude is fickle, full of lawless desire, unreasoned passion, and violent anger. The multitude must be held in by invisible terrors and pageantry. I think not the ancients acted rashly in introducing among the people notions concerning the gods and the beliefs in the terrors of hell, and that the moderns are foolish in banning such. So this is suggesting that it would be foolish to get rid of a belief in the terrors of hell and gods, because you need it to control people. Specifically, he says, quote, superstition maintains the cohesion of the Roman state. Well, I would say this is exactly what explains mass media pageantry today. Hyperstition. Hyperstitions are like superstitions, but they're reinforced in a echo chamber, and they're treated as objectively real. So that there are superstitions that some people believe in. Hyperstitions, people believe in them. They treat them as though they are real. Bull cut shooters, even aliens to some extent, chemtrails, climate change, 5G towers, all the things that are things that you would consider to be mere superstitions, but they're reinforced and they're treated like real. So here we have an example of someone who's aware of why the elite do what they do, describing it, and it perfectly mirrors today. Superstition maintaining the cohesion of the Roman state. I guess we've always been this way. So the question here is this a benevolent dictatorship? Do we need this? I know I don't. But do the masses? And sometimes when I look at TikTok or Twitter, I look at some of the things that people do and I'm like, well, maybe this is necessary. Like maybe life is better. Maybe it would be even better if they could intensify it. Like maybe the masses do need to be cajoled and scared. They need to be terrified. Maybe fearlessness is a bad development. Maybe it makes them dangerous. I'm not quite sure. But anyway, if you want an answer as to what is the point of the programming, you just have to look at media as religion. What's the point of religion? Has it ever really been to make people better and to fix the... No, religion has always been mind control, world view control. And this is a religion. Mass media is a religion. And the people who are like Protestants to it, they don't trust the media, they become alt media, which is, again, alt, shadows on the wall. You're still in the cave. Let's see what else we have here. Truth Hurt said I had to get off X, a bunch of fake truthers. Yeah, I find myself blocking so many people. X is garbage. I only go there for research purposes. I hardly interact. There aren't any meaningful conversations. But, you know, I'm there because it's the commons. But it's like you're looking into the collective id. X is also being set up for a fall. I believe disease X, this hypothetical disease that's going to be the big one, I think it's all a reference to the mind virus. And there's a lot of resentment in the world right now towards X and Musk taking this alt-right posture free speech absolutist, even though he is a space faker. People believe him. And this is relevant because the worldview we've been given with outer space is really about control. Space is, in my view, I believe this is true. I think it's just a metaphor for your inner space, for your mind. And worldview control is getting you to see the world in a certain way. And by getting you to believe in space, they took control of your mind. They quite literally constrained your concept of the world. Now you're being filtered through their bad movies. You're now an adherent to a belief system that comes out of their televised holy book. They show you their religious art, which are just, NASA art rather. Nasatology. Nasatology is a religion. But anyway, Musk isn't on your side or anybody's side. He's on the side of the power elite. He's part of the takedown of free speech. We will no longer have any justification for the free flow of ideas because look what X did. It allowed white nationalists to hook up with Russians and get the nuke and do Seattle, etc. And another thing too, truthers have been among the earliest of adopters of AI. Where like the AI stuff is all going to be used to further blur the distinction between real and fake. And this is not new, but what's interesting is truthers doing it. Like I'm talking like making images of an appropriately aged JFK, and then they all ogle it, treat it like it's real. Like they're manufacturing their own evidence that they can believe in. It's self-deception to a whole new level. Plain Decoded said, did you see Musk posing on 42 billion saying, what should I spend it on? No, I didn't, but again, 42, the number 42, it's code. 42,000 satellites. All a reference to Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, who was written by, what was his name? Douglas Adams. And Douglas Adams, interestingly, was born on 3/11. The movie opens up with Don't Panic. Now, this is interesting too. Think about it. Don't panic as a message as the world's about to be destroyed. Musk's car he sent to space had Don't Panic on the dashboard. Panic is a word that's derived from Pan, the Greek god of panic. So it's like terrorism. Anyway, I think it's notable that the movie's about a guy finding out the world's about to be destroyed, so he escapes, don't panic. And the pandemic comes along. And when we look at the symbolism of various aspects to it, I look at it as the panic-demic, because it's all about the fear. And it was the fear that got everyone to lock down. And it unified the world. And we've correlated this with the symbol of the One World Tower. And the One World Trade Tower looks like a big syringe. And syringe comes from a Greek word, syrinx, which is Pan's flute. Because Pan would play his flute in the woods. And that's how you would know he was coming, and you would go into a panic. So I think it's kind of interesting. You got this big syringe as a symbol of fear or panic, and then we have the panic-demic. And I think, too, that this whole thing that we were quarantining because of was really just a way of introducing a new concept of sin. And I think it's structured this way, that the progressives and then the traditionalists, left and right, progressives are motivated by their fear of the virus and the panic-demic, and the right protests that, but they're very much concerned about moral panics. They believe in the archaic or the older concept of sin. So one side has a newfangled scientific sin the other side won't purify itself against, and the other side believes in the old concept of sin, and the godless atheistic liberals are a threat to them. And so each side wants to quarantine against the other. This is why the right is always saying, get out of the cities, go rural. So it's rural versus urban. They're mutually exclusive, but they have two different concepts of sin, and each side thinks the other side is the carrier of that, and each side rejects the other side's cure. But it's the common denominator is fear, obviously. Truth Hurt says, it's truly scary to see where the collective minds will be in 10 years, maybe 5. It's just going to get deeper. But I'm sure we can carve this out. We can carve out the parallel media. You see, if we're not anti, then we're not lined up behind the antis. We're not lined up behind Trutherville. We don't have fake canaries and fake coal mines speaking for us. By being parallel and not being directly antagonistic, we also don't have any opposition. I mean, think about it. You got your mainstream views, and then the truthers who are opposing it, and the truthers are always opposed. They're censored. But it's all a faux censorship. It's performative. It's fake. They're not excluded. There's a difference between being banned and censored and acknowledged and being totally excluded and ghosted. So we don't even exist. And that is something that can work for our advantage. Because as we grow the body of off-world stage, parallel media, media skeptics, as we grow this body of, as a self-aware demographic, of media skeptics outside of their pro-anti dialectic, they have no way to stop us. They don't have the infrastructure to oppose us. They don't have a lot of people who can even tackle this effectively. Like, I think this is outside their area of expertise. So I'm looking forward to what we can do with this in the next 5 or 10 years. So no matter what happens to the collective mind, no matter what kind of alt reality games they get dragged into, they might be wearing space junk helmets at that point. We won't be. Unless we can't opt out. Unless we're surrounded by helmet Karens, then yeah, I guess we will be. Truth Hurt says, Tim, do you believe they're even faking news stories on a local level? I'm seeing some strange ones in my local area. Sure. PSYOPs are generally, the big ones we notice are like national events. It's like, well, why do we care about this event over here? It's because they're making us care, and it's politicized. But down to the local level, even if they're just reporting on the weather and local events, they're still liars because their frame of reference is the same as the big one. It's basically going to reinforce the dominant paradigm. They believe all the big lies. So they're already liars by default, even if they're telling you the truth locally. So that's important to keep in mind. But also, they're entirely compromised and they're part of the same infrastructure. You could have some honest, low-level reporters reading teleprompters, but they're reading teleprompted lies. They're lying even when they're telling the truth from their perspective because their perspective is built upon an edifice of lies. There is no truth in there. There is no truth in that box. There is only a consensus agreed upon mass delusion. Napoleon Bonaparte is credited with saying history is lies agreed upon. And I've added on to that to say mass media is lies agreed upon. Our mediated worldview is essentially that. It's lies that we've agreed upon. Napoleon Bonaparte is credited with saying that, quote, history is a set of lies we have agreed upon. This statement gives rise to the concept of an agreed upon lie, a statement put forth as fact for which there is no real support. All right, let's see what else we have here. This is where it's at. It says, I came and went and ended back here. I took a mag break on BitChute. Look, I like Mag Truth's channel. I just don't believe that transvestigationism is anything more than a peculiar fetish, a paraphilia at worst, a fetish, maybe a pseudoscience, but it's one of these areas where I think we need to stick to objective reality, and it's great to explore conspiracy theories, But you shouldn't remain a conspiracy theorist. You should find out what is knowable and what isn't. Conspiracy theorists are the people who are always just being played. And it's almost like a hazing at this point. You know, you say you're a conspiracy theorist, and then you get dragged through all kinds of stuff. Like, oh, I agree with this, but all the big proponents of that also attach it to this, this, and that. That's why Trutherville is just unsalvageable. Just burn it all at this point. It's not coherent. Plain says, what was your hoax aha moment? I knew it was Sandy, but I think it clicked on Christ Church. I thought Sandy was real. I thought that the Democrats sent in some mercenaries to murder a bunch of kids to score political points. I believe that. I believe the shooter was likely on SSRIs. I believed all the standard talking points with that one. Christ Church, I thought it was real, and I started to watch it, and then I had to stop because I wasn't alone and everybody was shocked by it. But I didn't let them intimidate me. Almost. I almost said, okay, this is a game changer. We can't call things hoaxes anymore. Now it's real. I fell for that for like 30 seconds. But then I watched it frame by frame. I learned about squibs, and I saw a number of other things that gave it away as, okay, AVR shells. The whole thing was so phony once you break it down. But as far as an aha moment, that's a very good question. I guess it's this. Around the time of Vegas, I started to realize, because it was Nice. You know, when you had that truck attack in Nice where there were some shoppers on the street and a terrorist rode through. This is 2016. 8 convicted of roles in Bastille Day truck attack. Some Islamic State sympathizer. A 19-ton cargo truck deliberately driven into crowds. Now, I watched this happen, and I remember in the chat room, I was on Paul Joseph Watson, who was one of Alex Jones's hosts at the time. He was on InfoWars. Paul Joseph Watson said, don't call it a hoax. There are victims and victims' families. You got to think about the families. If you're an auto hoaxer, I'm going to kick you out of here. And at that time, there was this competition where something would happen on the news, and everybody would rush to call it a hoax. You'd look for the first sign it was a hoax, and you'd jump on it. And then you'd get a lot of hits. It was like you were competing with mainstream. Here you have Fox News is talking about it, CNN's talking about it, and half a dozen truthers are talking about it, and we're all competing for the same audience. But those who were able to nail it down as a hoax first would get the most hits. So it was kind of a competition. And so auto hoaxing was at first derided as sloppy. You're not even investigating it. You're just calling it a hoax. You're not giving them the benefit of the doubt. You're not investigating it on the merits. That was the claim. And that's what I thought too at first. But then I realized, you know what? We're right every single time. We have not been wrong once. So after this attack, I'm watching some videos on it. I'm doing a live stream, and I'm saying, hey, look, there's some rubber people on the ground. They're throwing dummies out of the back of a truck. And they had this flip phone walk through, just like every other mass casualty event, the same terrible flip phone footage, where they don't stop long enough to focus. They just walk through it really fast. They don't check for pulses. It's just standard propaganda technique. And while I'm talking about this, there are these people in the chat room with me, and one of them says, don't you dare call this a hoax. That's my girlfriend. I'm like, oh, your girlfriend is a rubber dummy? I mean, that is a thing. But my point to him was, okay, you're saying that your girlfriend just got ran over by this big truck. You're over there in France. I'm here in America. I'm calling it a hoax. And you're on YouTube on some obscure channel with 30 people in it trying to stop me from calling your girlfriend fake. Why aren't you in the hospital holding her hand? Like, shouldn't you be over there where she is because she just got run over by a truck instead of being here on YouTube? That's when I realized a lot of liars will lie reflexively for some weird reason. And look, was the guy an agent? I don't know. Because a lot of people used to just lie all the time. I can name names. I mean, Carly Sunshine just comes to mind. Used to know this person, Flat Earth Channel. After the Vegas shooting, she put up a video and she claimed that her old gym teacher was shot. I'm like, okay, well, another liar. Lying for clout, I guess. Lying for clout, lying for clicks, lying to reinforce the lie. I mean, to reinforce the mainstream media's credibility, to be a devil's advocate against the devil's advocate. That's something I don't get. Someone's going to say, are you sure it's all fake? I'm just being the devil's advocate here. No, you're not. You're being a media advocate. You're working for the devil. If there is anyone who could be called a devil's advocate, it's going to be the auto hoaxer who's questioning the mainstream. Questioning the people questioning the mainstream isn't the same thing. Anyway, after this event, I realized auto hoaxing is right every time. So there's a methodology here with the news media, as in maybe it's not always a question of fake or real with these events. Maybe these events are all fake. Maybe they're constantly faking us out with propaganda events. So I would say this was it, 2016. And the term auto hoaxer really became something not as a pejorative, but it became a way of defining what we were doing as separate from, the mainstream conspiracy theorists. And that's really the way I would group them. You got your auto hoaxers and then your mainstream conspiracy theorists who think it's real until proven fake. But auto hoaxers would say it's fake until proven real. We shifted the burden of proof back. Skyfish says, another stabbing on a bus in LA. Interviewed witness was sharing his account with a glaring 999 sticker on the light pole behind him. HLG says, auto hoax is conspiracy therapy. Well, okay, now, it turns out that skepticism used to just mean suspending judgment until you get more facts, and it was also attached to the idea that if you don't automatically believe, then you're not going to be as troubled internally by a lot of things that you can't verify and that may not even be real. So it was seen as a path. It's a path to peace of mind. Epiky is what the term was. Suspension of judgment leads to ataraxia, which is peace of mind. And this later kind of evolved into Epicureanism, hedonism, the idea that maybe life is meant to be enjoyed, which is what you would end up doing. I mean, look, if you find out that decades of mass shootings and terror attacks are all fake, if all these terrifying God constructs do not exist, there's nothing to fear, the world's not going to end, then what are you left to do here? Do you need to sit around worrying about the future of your race or your country or the planet? You're worried about planet killer asteroids? Or maybe you could focus on your own purpose. And that's kind of where this leads, interestingly enough. You unplug from the matrix, what's next? It's kind of up to you. But here's something else to consider. You only have so much bandwidth. And you only have so many F's to give. You give them all away to every cause, every crisis actor, then you lose sight of your own place in this world. And I kind of think maybe we shouldn't be so flippant about giving away our loosh to every single issue. Maybe we shouldn't always operate with the framework that they hand us, like, oh, we better do this or it's all going to end. And then consider too, psychosomatics and nocebo effects. Stress matters. Paranoia has deleterious effects. And again, your cognitive surplus that you would have when you get rid of this stuff is just something to tap into. Who knows where it goes? But I know that when I stopped caring about these things the way normies do, when I stopped believing these things to be real, it does take something of a weight off. Things are not that they're less serious, but they're less ominous. I think that fear is a byproduct of ignorance. And so you replace ignorance with knowledge, you lose the fear. People are ignorant about what are they spraying from the airplanes. Now I'm scared. The world's going to be destroyed. I'm being poisoned. That's your ignorance, and it's causing you to be scared. And you know what? You might actually die. You might die from that. You might die from not chemtrail lung, but the nocebo effect, psychosomatics. Maybe you're making yourself sick. So yeah, there are consequences to believing all this stuff that isn't worth believing in, that isn't real. I'll turn the phones on tomorrow. I was really working on the phone systems, and we definitely got an improvement because we've tried so many different things, and I think we've arrived at the best possible solution. Tonight I didn't have them on because I mistakenly set it to 15 minutes instead of 2 hours, but we will have it on tomorrow. This is where it's at. Says, why that Diddy video look like Rodney King's video? Yeah, it was pretty poor quality. Someone asked if I copyrighted Auto Hoax. You could say it's a common law copyright and trademark because of the Auto Hoaxology, Auto Hoax 101. I think we have made the claim. It hasn't been registered as a federal trademark, but I probably will soon. Eventually I will do that. Truth Hurt says, agreed, focus on what you can control in your own environment. Sure, I mean, one of our greatest resources is time. And I hear this phrase, attention economy. And I'm like, wow, they really look at it that way. Our attention is the real currency here. They don't want your money, they want your attention. Your attention is way more valuable. Your attention is your time. It's your energy and your time used to power whatever egregore, whatever movement, whatever psyop that they're whatever hyperstition they're introducing into the world. And the hyperstitions can only exist within a closed system that reinforces them, that doesn't allow contradictory information in. This is the purpose of censorship. Censorship is there for mind control. If you can't talk about the ideas that deconstruct the big lies are secure. And what I've been working on with Auto Hoaxology is introducing the concepts of skepticism and a number of axiomatic statements that we can make when it comes to how we assess media. Fake until proven real is reasonable. If a psyop is bifurcated, totally split politically, it's fake. And as we go through this, though, there's the point I'm reaching here is that we're not telling people what to believe. That's not what we do here. What we're doing is we're explaining what media is and how it is creating a false model, and it's a closed system. Flat versus round, pointless conversation right now. Open versus closed. And we do exist, or the consensus reality is a closed system of ideas that contains the whole universe of ideas that we consider to be MSM, plus Woketown, wokeism, and trutherism. But it doesn't contain auto-hoaxing. It doesn't contain skepticism of both sides. It doesn't contain it. We've been excluded. And one other point here. So the idea of flat Earth came out, and here you have this challenge to the status quo, challenge to the priesthood of scientism. But it had a limited use because the term was already co-opted by controlled opposition. The Flat Earth Society already worked to make it seem ludicrous. If you're asserting the Earth is flat, you're just as ludicrous as the person asserting it's a globe. If you're asserting it as a model, the flat Earth shouldn't be a model. It's a question. Is it a ball? Is the model valid? Can we trust the sources that we get that from? Is it reasonable, or does it require a leap of faith? Are we conflating evidence with see-say? See-say is like hearsay. I hear it, so I say it. I see it on the screen, so it's real. But I mean, it's a valid question. But like conspiracy theorist, flat earther, these are non-starters for organizing because it's based on an assertion. What we're doing here is we're introducing a philosophical posture. I don't have to watch the news every day to know what's real and fake because I understand what media is. Far different than thinking that media is actually what they say it is. This is where it's at. Says, is the dollar vigilante guy a plant? His video from Epstein Island was interesting. There are some people who are very popular who may not be plants, but for the most part they adhere to the orthodoxies and the norms of alt media. Like if you're an anti-V, you're pretty much controlled opposition. Or you've taken a controlled opposition position. And at this point, we have to take responsibility for it. Like, I'm not trying to call people out, oh, you were an anti-vaxxer, therefore you're controlled op. But I am saying that if you took that position, you did so because you were part of a controlled dialectic, wittingly or not. So a lot of these channels that get really big are often in an echo chamber of their own. So maybe they're not plants, but they do play a role. But I like people like that who do their own investigations. That's really what we need. Lean Dion says Jeff Betwick is a pro-grifter 100%. Yeah, sure. Again, you know, I'm in a different universe than them. Trutherville is a lost cause, and I'm hoping that anyone there who's salvageable will join us. Plain Decoded says, I remember when I was 6, standing at Lake Erie with my dad, asked me what I thought the shape of the earth was as we looked out, and I said flat. Well, if we're going to be honest with ourselves, from the perspective of a human being, the earth is flat and stationary. Your body, your organism, your senses cannot tell you otherwise. So if you're saying, oh, it's a curve, it's a ball, it's spinning through space, you're saying so upon what authority? Oh, I saw it on TV. I've come to believe it. What we're raising here is the question, can you say you know it to be true? Or can you merely assert to believe it? And globe belief is the best they have. They believe their model is real. And I don't think that's good enough. I think the rational, more intelligent position, given the fact that we are ruled over by liars, is to go to agnosticism. In fact, I have something I want to read here real quick. I picked up this book for a couple of dollars today. It's called Mastering Logical Fallacies. And I'm just going through this as we get ready to do our various debates. And it made a really good point in here about agnosticism. Let me see if I can find it. But the point he was making was simply that if you don't know something to be true, or you don't know how it's true, or how it's, for example, we'll just go with magic shows. You're watching a magician perform a trick. If you don't know how he did it, you don't have to default to, oh, it therefore must be magic. You can actually stop and you can wait. You can suspend judgment. I'll probably find it later here, but there's a pretty good chapter in here about agnosticism and when it makes more sense to wait and to not take a side, which is one of the principal arguments that I've been making here, is that we're inundated with easily 48 hours worth of news every day. No way you could parse through all of that. Nobody has time for that. And that's by design. It's to flood you with so much information that you rely on sources that you trust. So there you have trust and faith. And you have to trust that these guys are trusting the right people as well. So it's all built on trust. It's on really shaky ground, if you ask me. Especially as more and more of this infrastructure of lying is being exposed and the sheer fakeability of it. I mean, the fact that Rogan is looking at footage of atomic bombs saying these might be fake, I mean, that's a big deal. in a sense, if it's not part of an op. All right, let me go ahead and terminate this. I have to head out here. It's almost 11. I'm a little late. We covered a lot of ground. We'll definitely take calls tomorrow. 529, JFK is coming back. 611, Seattle gets nuked. Heads up on that. I'm continuing my work on the ISS takedown video. Something to look forward to. And if you want me to include any talking points or any videos, feel free to contact me at the main YouTube page. I'm uploading updates on that project as it advances. This is
So these guys,
The Auto Hoaxer Revolution by MVP, the Hardware Vandal. I'll see you all tomorrow. Thanks, chat.
penguin usage rate.
They actually know how to do spiritual warfare online. They're good at it. They're trained in it.
IPS is just sharing the truth.
Yeah, respect to the Infinite Plane Society.
The Auto Hoaxer Revolution.
Auto Hoaxer.
The Auto Hoaxer Revolution.
Auto Hoaxer. Auto Hoaxer.
The Auto Hoaxer Revolution.
We've taken over auto hoax. The term auto hoaxer was meant to attack people who jump to conclusions too fast. Until we realized that no, actually, we were right the whole time to do it this way.
The Auto Hoaxer Revolution.
Auto hoaxing really has to do with a very tight grasp on the facts of reality. Auto hoaxing is based on logic, and automatically believing what you see from your media sources is actually the opposite of logic.
The Auto Hoaxer Revolution.
Auto Hoaxer.
The Auto Hoaxer Revolution.
Auto Hoaxer. Auto Hoaxer.
The Auto Hoaxer Revolution.
Legitimate auto hoaxing is the only legitimate threat to the mainstream stranglehold over mass perception. The auto hoax meme, the auto hoax concept needs to be mainstreamed, and I think more than ever people will understand it when it's explained.